It was December 13th, 2008, in Los Angeles, California. The day I met Ryan Roth. It isn't so often that a true crime writer gets to meet his subject. I was visiting a friend, an English woman living in LA named Karen Stapley. I had just gone through the first semester of my master's degree in Canada. It was rough, partially because I was going through a breakup, partially because of my rampant alcoholism, but mostly because in large part graduate studies acts as a horseshit hazing ritual where your professors try to make it seem like life in academia is harder than it really is. I had just finished writing a term paper for an insufferable professor known for failing students who disagreed with her, but then I happily jetted off to relax and recuperate amid the bright lights and lowlights of the City of Angels. I figured escaping the snow, not having to pay for a hotel, and having a free tour guide were major perks. My stay in Los Angeles was fairly boilerplate. No sooner had I exited LAX, I was accosted by a tall, morbidly obese man who showered flecks of spittle in my face when he talked, and he wouldn't shut up about the charity he was working for, which I later found out was fraudulent. At the time, I was a polite 22-year-old Canadian, far less jaded than I am now, so I gave him $20 to make him go away. It would set the tone for much of my stay there. After 30 minutes of waiting outside LAX, my English friend finally arrived in her car and whisked me off to her apartment near MacArthur Park. As an outsider, I was amused by the heavy iron bars and armed security guard at the entrance to the building. After dropping off my stuff, my friend took me to Santa Monica for the late afternoon and evening, where I had to kill time by myself while she went to work at the Bel Air Bay Club, a place so exclusive it had rejected Tom Hanks. I had Mexican food at the end of the Santa Monica Pier, drank tequila and a couple bottles of Corona, and I admired the ocean at sunset. I walked back up the pier into town. As a foreigner, I marveled at the drug addicts walking in and out of a Barnes & Noble bookstore, occasionally yelling incoherently at the bookshelves, without the staff taking any notice of them. One of the drug addicts, who was sitting on the floor, muttering to herself, looked at me and drew her finger across her neck, silently threatening to slit my throat. So, all in all, a pretty standard introduction to LA. The next few days were composed of sightseeing, drinking far too much, and maybe smoking a certain substance out of a water pipe. But there was a mild complication added to my stay. Karen was moving from her apartment building to a house on the other side of the city, where she planned to sublet rooms to 2 additional roommates. Without being told this before I arrived, I was conscripted to help move all her stuff. It didn't take me long to guess that this is why she wanted me to visit on those particular dates in the first place. But I figured having a free tour guide, a place to stay, and a companion in Los Angeles was fair enough a trade for a few hours huffing and puffing. At the time I arrived, Karen was still interviewing for one of the rooms. A man had contacted her via Craigslist, which is never a good start, and had spent a considerable amount of time charming her over the phone. He identified himself as Ryan Roth. This was not his real name, but it turned out to be the name that was, years later, splashed across the international headlines. One evening, we arranged to meet Roth at the new house so the prospective tenant could look at it and be interviewed by Karen. Upon arrival, I found Roth to be a man in his late 20s, moderately tall, around 6'1", and not what I call muscular, but in reasonably fine fettle. He had a friendly, handsome face that my untrained eye would rate as 6.5 or 7 out of 10, with designer stubble that was fashionable back then, and some sort of froofy boy band haircut. He spoke with an upper-middle-class English accent and a slightly effeminate, high-pitched voice. He gave off a sure and definite bohemian, hippie, devil-may-care vibe that screamed, "I meditate, surf, and think it's a big deal I visited Asia." He dressed like shit, but it was obviously calculated to make him look like a man of the people. It was a loathsome sort of pretentiousness that I'd encountered with Brits before, usually with upper-class people swanning about London. Needless to say, my first impression on meeting him was douche chills. Or perhaps it was deeper, the instinctual alarm bell of something more. Roth took a quick look at the house and his room, and immediately demanded to stay there. Karen, forming a more positive opinion of the handsome stranger than I did, made vague, polite noises of acknowledgement. Roth insisted he wanted to move in that night, and just needed to go and pick up his stuff. We decided to jet off to a nearby cocktail bar first, in order for tenant and landlady to get to know each other better. Drinks at the cocktail bar served as part 2 of the de facto interview. As such, Karen mostly just asked Roth about himself, and Roth was all too happy to oblige. It soon became clear that Roth was a talker, and he was his own favorite subject. He bragged pretty shamelessly. He had no mark of humility, and, most crucially, no mark of another man in his past telling him to shut the f*** up with his fist, something which can be very educational. Instead, Roth just puffed out his chest and talked about how wonderful he was. He was a sewer pipe of speech. I smelt a cad, as if he were a dead skunk in a river of shit. I didn't have any questions, and was honestly getting a bit bored with this douchebag, so I busied myself drinking copious amounts of bourbon, and glancing occasionally at a very good-looking waitress who was no doubt an aspiring actress or model. I was on vacation, and wanted to be out sightseeing. I was blissfully unconcerned with the finer details of Karen's living arrangements. Over the course of the conversation, Ryan Roth revealed the following pieces of information. He was a wanderer, a traveler, a ramblin', gamblin' dude who had rejected a conventional life back in England. He was very concerned with the welfare of the Third World and was pained at the wealth disparity that existed between the West and the rest. He said that he wanted to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom one day. He said that he ran a charity that rescued child sex slaves. He told us a story about how, at great risk to his own life, he forced his way into a child brothel in Cambodia earlier that year and whisked the kids out of the place, nearly getting killed in the process. Roth went so far as to show us the scar he had received from a knife-wielding pimp. In reality, it turns out this scar was from his youth, when he was bitten by a dog. To my knowledge, the canine in question was not involved in human sex trafficking. The dog was simply a good judge of character. At this point in the conversation, Roth had stolen my attention away from the good-looking waitress. After telling us the story of his daring rescue, I was amazed. And he said that it wasn't the first time he'd done that sort of thing. Apparently, he rescued children from brothels on the regular. He called himself Rambo Ryan. And he was seeking charitable donations to house the children in an orphanage on a small private island he intended to purchase in the Philippines. I blurted out, "Wow, that almost sounds hard to believe." There was a pause. Roth fixed me with a silent and impassive stare for a moment, before turning the conversation onto other topics. In fairness to myself, I merely intended the phrase to express my amazement at his daring and the fact he dabbled in a dark world that I scarcely ever contemplated before. I had no real stake in whether or not the story was true, but in hindsight, I realized how my statement could imply that I thought he was full of shit, which, of course, it turned out he was. As we left the cocktail bar, Ryan Roth, with great regret, informed Karen that there was a problem with his UK bank and said he would send her the money for a deposit and the first month's rent when it came through. I believe it was Karen who paid for Roth's drink. We gave Roth a ride to his previous place of residence, which he found on a couchsurfing website that later banned him for theft and death threats against his hosts. He duly grabbed a single suitcase of stuff. Bohemian charity workers travel light, after all. On the way to drop it off at Karen's new house, we pulled over at a grocery store. Karen just needed to grab a few things, and I was left alone in the car with Roth. I sat in the front passenger seat. He sat in the back, right behind me. Roth spoke. "Don't ask me any more questions about my charity work." "Why's that?" I asked. "Because I don't like your attitude," he spat, somewhat venomously. "Okay, buddy," came my reply. We sat for a moment in silence. It suddenly dawned on me that my saying, "Wow, that almost sounds hard to believe," regarding his child brothel rescues in Cambodia must have sounded like suspicion to him. Still being a fairly polite young man of 22, and a Canadian of all creatures, and not wanting to mess things up with Karen's prospective tenant, I said nothing for the moment. We went back to Karen's new house, where Roth dumped his bags and changed quickly into his pajamas. We opened a bottle of wine and drank until midnight. And I sat in relative silence, watching them chit-chat and flirt. Then Karen and I drove back to her apartment near MacArthur Park. Meanwhile, Roth stayed the night alone in the new house. I said to Karen that I had some suspicions about this guy, that he wasn't what he seemed. Karen later told me that she had shrugged off my suggestions at the time because she thought I was just being jealous of the handsome, daring charity worker who had just jetted into her life. And that would be a plausible explanation 9 out of 10 times for most people, but I was still nursing a broken heart from back home, and it didn't explain what he said to me in the car. Something about the guy just stank. However, quite frankly, I didn't bring it up again because the rest of my stay involved a rush to move all of Karen's stuff to her new house on a deadline before both of us left the country, me for Canada, her for a skiing holiday in Switzerland. It quickly became a chaotic affair, involving moving an endless supply of boxes across the city, visiting Karen's ex-boyfriend at 2 a.m. to conscript him into storing some of her stuff, calling a Rolodex of other men on the final day to lend a hand moving, and Karen chugging a Smirnoff Ice in front of the elevator to relieve a panic attack before driving in her car. That morning, a few hours before we were both due at LAX, we met a kindly old millionaire from the Bel Air Bay Club, where Karen worked. There was no time left to deliver the final load of stuff to her house across the city before our flights departed, so the old man drove me in his SUV, following behind Karen in her own car, in a frantic high-speed chase through downtown LA to dump her remaining stuff in a parking garage. Her ex-boyfriend picked it up later. Suffice to say, I was a little pissed off with how the latter half of my trip had gone. Much later, when I spoke to Karen again, she told me that Ryan Roth had stayed in her house for 4 months. He never paid a deposit and never paid a dime in rent. Karen had initially planned on charging him $800 per month, but she decided to give him a discount at $650 because he would be, quote, such a great roommate. The child rescuing story obviously did its trick. Roth also said he'd be splitting his time between LA and San Francisco, where he'd frequently be staying on fundraising trips, and he'd be renting 2 places at once. This never happened. Roth just sat around Karen's house in LA for months, drinking cheap Charles Shaw wine in his pajama pants. He wound up owing Karen about $2,600 in rent, and when things got confrontational and Karen told him to leave, he insisted on staying anyway. It is rather difficult to secure sublet evictions in Los Angeles, and Roth claimed strenuously, several times, that he had already transferred the money to Karen's account. He had not. When Roth finally did leave, he stole several $100s worth of Karen's property, including an iPod and an expensive camera. He also stole things without monetary value, like a calendar of family photos Karen's mother had made for her, and bizarrely, some of Karen's clothing. He then sent Karen a threatening email, saying, quote, "Some dark shit is going to happen to you." Roth also stole the car belonging to Karen's other housemate, which he soon abandoned in the streets of LA. He also stole the same roommate's checkbook and started writing fraudulent checks. The police were called and came to investigate the thefts. Fortunately for Roth, LA is a dystopian crime-riddled shithole. The cops had other things on their minds. And so, Ryan Roth never faced any serious investigation. He was not charged. He was not deported. But, in hindsight, the police might have spared the world a large deal of grief if they had simply done their duty. Because it would appear that our daring charity worker was not what he seemed. Nobody had any idea how deep the rabbit hole went. But at the time I met him, Ryan Roth was in the middle of an international criminal career spanning 2 decades that would ultimately net him about $13 million in modern money. It was only 11 years later, on the eve of the pandemic, when word shot around the world that Ryan Roth was dead, that I discovered just how deep the rabbit hole went. It touched fucking magma. Meet Ryan Roth. Ryan Flynn, no middle name, alias Ryan Roth, was born on the 16th of August, 1980, in Southampton, UK, to single mother Sheena Flynn. He was the youngest of 2 boys, with his brother, Danny Flynn, being born a couple years earlier. Danny and Ryan's father was what they call in Britain a traveller, or somewhat less PC, but for clarity, a gypsy or a pikey, like Brad Pitt's character in Snatch. There are 2 broad types of travelers: the peaceful type, pursuing a traditional nomadic lifestyle, and the criminal type, that is constantly on the move, wreaking havoc. Ryan's father, allegedly, belonged to the latter sort. Sheena Flynn had never dated much in her youth, and had met Ryan's father when he was already married. Being of Irish extraction with heavy Catholic influences, he had no intention of divorcing his wife. Sheena and Ryan's father carried on a secret affair for several years, resulting in both Danny and Ryan as their offspring. Their father would visit Sheena and the children whenever he was in town, averaging once a month. His father had a lot of money, from God knows where. One day, he turned up at Sheena's house driving a Rolls Royce, for which the local car salesman said he paid in cash. Allegedly, Ryan's father was engaged in criminal activity and was always out to rip people off. He also allegedly had the habit of being highly aggressive and violent, allegedly engaging in acts of extortion and intimidation. He would occasionally pop round to give Sheena money for the boys, but the process of delivery was very cloak and dagger. He would hide the money in a nearby forest for Sheena to collect, so people did not see the 2 of them interact or trace the money's dubious provenance. Eventually, this man lost interest in Sheena and her sons, and the payments ceased. According to her family, Sheena Flynn was a kind, hard-working woman. Despite her relative poverty and having to raise 2 boys, she refused to go on welfare. She would work 5, 6, 7 days a week as a house cleaner and also at a care home for the elderly, washing clothes and ironing. Sheena enjoyed this quiet, isolated work because it was a respite from dealing with people whom she was generally wary of. According to her relatives, Sheena was humble, quiet, and just wanted to do her job so she could go home to her garden. She would spend hours in her greenhouse planting seeds, repotting and growing flowers, attracting birds with feeders, and reveling in the presence of robins, squirrels, and butterflies. She didn't ask for much in life, and she sure as shit wasn't given much. Sheena rented a small house in Wynyards Park, Salisbury Green, in Southampton, and sent her kids to Brookfield Community School. Ryan was a very demanding child. He was fussy about what he would eat and would dictate what his mother cooked for dinner. His bedroom was never clean unless Sheena cleaned it, and when she didn't have the chance, it looked like a bomb had gone off in it. Sheena, an affectionate mother, did her best to try to please Ryan. She was also, allegedly, a little frightened of him. Ryan's brother Danny was also a handful. According to his uncle, Danny had a very bad temper and was quick with his fists. This did not bode well, and he was locked up in juvie at around the age of 17 for, quote, demanding money with menace. While Ryan would frequently issue threats to people, he didn't have the same stomach for actual violence. Ryan also had a temper, sure, but according to his schoolmates, apparently, when you confronted him, he would, quote, back down like a pussy. Ryan Flynn was a talker, not a fighter. Danny Flynn was the muscle. As for the source of Ryan's future criminality, one can only speculate. Perhaps it was the influence of his shady father before he abandoned them completely. Perhaps Sheena was too soft on her son. Or perhaps Ryan was just born a rotten egg. He certainly would grow up to have a lot of the same character traits as congenital psychopaths like Ted Bundy or Jack Unterweger. The narcissistic personality disorder to boot. The only difference is that instead of murder and sexual sadism, Ryan was more of an emotional sadist who got off in his pantaloons from lying and stealing money. That was his compulsion. Sort of like the Mormon psychopath Mark Hoffman. And like Ted Bundy and Jack Unterweger and Mark Hoffman, Ryan Flynn could easily have made something legitimate of himself. He was tailor-made for business. Effortlessly charismatic, could have sold sand to a camel and charmed a dog out of a butcher's shop, if he had only been capable of controlling his darker impulses. At school, Ryan was distinctly average, middling grades at best, though it might be fairer to say he did poorly where it counted. Even in adulthood, Ryan struggled with basic spelling and grammar. So sure, he wasn't a born genius. But this was also due to a severe lack of interest or effort. Instead, he bluffed his way through. A schoolmate of his described Ryan as, quote, an utter wally who was always full of shit. By and large, Ryan was also a deliberate loner, who only kept a couple of close friends at a time. Emphasis on the words at a time, because he would eventually wind up alienating people. Ryan lied to his schoolmates, claiming that he was rich, rather than the lower-class kid on the economic margins that he actually was. Ryan demonstrated a superiority complex around his schoolmates, carrying himself as though he always knew better than anyone else. He had a nasty habit of talking down to people in a condescending and demeaning way. If a schoolmate or friend ever called Ryan on his bullshit, he would not talk to them for weeks or cut off relations completely. He had a very fragile ego and didn't cope well with banter, schoolyard ribbing, or engaging in playful and honest competition. Unless, of course, he was winning the game. Ryan also developed the habit of character assassination, circulating harmful rumors about any of his schoolmates with whom he was feuding. At age 11, Ryan got a paper route from the owner of a corner shop. He quickly took on several of these paper routes, requiring an early rise in the morning every day of the week. He wanted to monopolize all the routes in the neighborhood, but, unbeknownst to the shopkeeper, this was so he could sell the rights to the paper routes to other kids and get them to do all the work, while he collected a sizable cut for doing absolutely nothing. As Ryan grew older, he was blessed with reasonably good looks, a handsome face, a decent physique, and a non-threatening boy band aesthetic which jived with his somewhat effeminate voice and self-preening mannerisms. As a friend of mine, Alexandra, once put it, an Adonis with balls the size of raisins. Combined with good looks, an artificially cultivated charm, and a chronic oversupply of confidence, he was not unpopular with girls. But despite his superficial appeal, school friends claim that when Ryan rarely did dabble with girls at all at school, the relationships did not last very long. He pissed off girls fairly quickly, and word got round. He was also known to explode with furious anger at the drop of a hat, and sometimes without any apparent provocation. In romance, Ryan was also vindictive. One school friend alleges that Ryan paid someone to smash the windows of an ex-girlfriend's house when she dumped him. In his teenage years, Ryan began to weasel money out of his grandparents, Sheena's mother and father. Both had been a huge help to Sheena while she was raising her boys, and generally speaking, they were well disposed toward Ryan. He would borrow a few £100s at a time, and just blew the money on partying. Ryan later claimed to a girlfriend that his grandfather was his surrogate father figure, and that he admired him greatly. There is no evidence of this. According to another relative, Ryan only came round when he wanted something. Ryan's grandfather was also not rich, living on an old age pension and a veteran's pension. He had his leg blown off in the Second World War. When his grandfather died in the late 1990s, Ryan claimed that he was deeply mentally scarred by the loss of this massively influential father figure, and also by the fact Ryan was tragically prevented from going to his funeral. In reality, Ryan simply didn't show. The truth was, Ryan and his grandfather had a falling out several years before, because Ryan was constantly pestering his grandparents for money, and his grandfather eventually called him out for it. After finishing secondary school in 1998, Ryan loafed around Southampton for a time. According to one of my sources, Ryan was already allegedly engaged in criminal activity and petty scams involving small amounts of money. Ryan also, allegedly, was involved in violent acts alongside his older brother Danny, who was released from juvenile prison only a couple years prior. According to my source, allegedly these violent acts would not involve man-to-man fistfights or street brawls or throwing a few punches in bars. They allegedly would involve calculated and surprise ambushes on people who, quote, needed sorting out, the intent of which was not a fair fight, but to inflict grievous bodily harm on an unsuspecting person. All of this is a bit of a far cry from the altruistic charity worker who rescued children from brothels. During this aimless period, Ryan got into tennis and later claimed that he was an experienced tennis coach and he could have played professionally. That was bullshit, of course. And also around this time, Ryan got into social media in a big way. The precursors of the social media giants were just starting to get their start at the turn of the millennium, and due to the inherent narcissism involved in posting pictures and status updates about yourself online, Ryan Flynn took to social media like a moth to a flame. Not all of Ryan's internet use was harmless, however. At age 20, he was caught impersonating an acquaintance on Friends Reunited, where he posted a lot of defamatory nonsense about this person. The victim's friends figured out that the perpetrator was Ryan because the idiot was stupid enough to use his own email, which was visible on the site. To quote one of my sources, "He's lucky he flew around the world because he still owed a kicking for that. I can't wait to see him locked up." Ryan also seems to have engaged in a bit of Grand Theft Auto. According to one of his former friends, one day Ryan turned up driving an old motorbike and said that he'd gotten it for quote-unquote free and it needed fixing up. Naturally, Ryan didn't have the money to pay for the repairs. But 2 weeks later, Ryan pulled up driving a brand new car, and he said he'd bought it. That's a major turnaround from being absolutely skint 2 weeks earlier. Around this time, Ryan also escalated leeching money off his grandmother, Dorothy. He claimed that he needed seed money for various business ventures, and that he'd pay her back with interest. None of these business ventures materialized. Again, Ryan just blew it all living large, rather than getting an honest job. One source estimates that between the years 1999 and 2002, Ryan scammed his grandmother out of £20,000, or roughly £44,000 in modern money. That's about 59 grand US. And Dorothy was not a rich woman. This was a sizable chunk of her savings. She loaned Ryan the money because he had assured her, in elaborate terms, that he'd pay her back, and of course because he was her grandson and she loved him. Aside from a tiny repayment of £350 years later to shut her up, Ryan never paid her back a penny more. And this wasn't the last of the money he would siphon off her. On his LinkedIn page, Ryan claims that he attended the University of Southampton around this time, studying both psychology and law for 2 years apiece, before leaving the university with his studies unfinished, but, according to him, with the option to complete. Occasionally, Ryan would also claim that he had either a PhD or a Juris Doctor, swanning around calling himself Dr. Ryan. The University of Southampton, meanwhile, has since stated to the press that they could not find a single report that Ryan ever studied anything there, whether PhD or bachelor's, whether law, psychology, or even so much as basket weaving. However, this didn't stop Ryan from taking out a student loan, which he has yet to repay. And while Ryan's claims to have officially enrolled and studied at Southampton were apparently cat piss, he evidently did show up to campus to pretend to others that he was studying there. At the same time, Ryan also claimed to a few of his friends that he was studying marine biology at nearby Solent University. A busy boy. In reality, being a no-good parasite, without any real direction or prospects, Ryan was skint. According to one of his former mates, in order to earn a little bit of money, Ryan obtained, by unknown means, a big bag of ecstasy pills to sell to the young men and women who were actually attending university. However, Ryan was apparently not bright enough to even be a good drug dealer, and he made the rookie mistake of dipping into his own supply. In fact, Ryan gobbled down so many ecstasy pills at once that he overdosed, had a bad trip, and suffered a psychotic break. He went on a rampage. He was found at his mother's house, sitting like a demented rooster on top of her garden shed. Ryan was taken to hospital, where he was treated for his overdose, then sectioned under the Mental Health Act and transported to a nearby psychiatric hospital. Apparently, the psychiatrist found that Ryan's behavior was not just due to drugs. Based upon the only thorough mental health examination Ryan ever permitted himself to undergo in his entire life, the psychiatrist discovered that he exhibited some disturbing tendencies and kept him confined. Ryan was considered a danger to both himself and to others. But the psychiatric hospital at which Ryan was held was not high security. He escaped and disappeared. One of his former friends eventually tracked him down to Ibiza, as this was occasionally a place where Ryan would go when he managed to con himself a bit of money. The former friend spent a few days trying to convince Ryan, over his many loud interruptions, to return to the UK and see his worried mother. During the car ride to the airport, Ryan continued to argue and rationalize wildly about how he couldn't return home, how his mother wouldn't understand, and how the authorities had it in for him. Ryan continued to viciously argue with his friend on the plane ride back to the UK. According to statements made by this friend, it's quite clear that Ryan was deeply unhinged. In the event, Ryan did not return home to speak to his mother. He did not turn himself into the UK authorities for skipping out on a mental health ward. Instead, a few days after arriving back in England, Ryan jetted off for America. A worried and devastated Sheena did not hear from her son for 6 years. And by then, Ryan had caused a fair bit of harm to a large number of victims. Hollywood thief. In late 2001, a young mentally unstable Englishman rocked up to the United States on a quest for fame and fortune. Initially, Ryan had ambitions of going to Los Angeles and becoming an actor. He wasn't going to let a total lack of theater experience stop him. And hell, plenty of psychopaths are capable of making a fortune in Hollywood. So, on balance, it wasn't a bad plan. Around this time, Ryan Flynn adopted the alias Ryan Roth. According to a conversation with a former friend, he did so because it sounded similar to the uber-wealthy European banking family, the Rothschilds, without the full name being used, because that would have been too on the nose. He also said he adopted it because Roth sounded vaguely Jewish, which Ryan rather prejudicially believed would help him in Hollywood. Ryan would also go by the alias Daniel Bernard in France, and, as mentioned previously, he occasionally called himself Dr. Ryan Roth. Meanwhile, his acting career did not get off to a great start. You'd think that a compulsive liar might be able to bend his habits toward acting, but that wasn't really the problem. In order to become a Hollywood actor, you actually have to put in some hard work. You need to book auditions, face countless rejections, spend hours learning and rehearsing your lines, and probably work a humiliating grunt job and live in fairly impoverished circumstances while you chase your dream. Roth, on the other hand, was allergic to good, honest work. He certainly wasn't going to fetch coffees while he was trying to make it big. Although the acting career seemed dead on arrival, Roth did once wind up on an early 2000s reality TV show. I could not find footage of Roth's appearance, but according to my source, Roth can be seen swaggering around an LA apartment, cringingly chatting up the female members of the show. Ryan's mother, Sheena Flynn, reportedly was a bit ashamed of his behavior when she saw it. And, alas, Roth's presence on the reality show did nothing to rocket him to stardom, nor did it earn him much money. It was around this time that Roth developed his scheme for staying in places for free. He wouldn't apply to rent an apartment himself. After all, he didn't have a rental track record, or a stable income, or even residency status in the United States. Instead, Roth would look up wanted ads for roommates in newspapers and online, and he favored arrangements where a person was subletting a room so Roth wouldn't have to sign anything official. Usually, he'd bunk up with roommates in their 20s who were young, naive, and more chill. They were the easiest to hoodwink. Roth would also prefer subletting a room from a female roommate, since males were more likely to beat the shit out of him when he didn't pay. Subletting transactions of this kind are usually done in cash and under the table, often without the approval of the actual landlord of the property. And this was a point of vulnerability. Upon arriving at a place, Roth would be as charming as he could, get the room, and spin a story about how he couldn't pay straight away. For instance, claiming that his UK bank was giving him trouble. Roth would promise to pay up within a few days. He would then evade requests for rent money for weeks, and when Roth was eventually asked to leave, he would steal a bunch of shit and move on and do the same thing again. Usually, Roth had already lined up a new apartment by the time he was thrown out. Otherwise, he'd steal a car and spend a few nights sleeping rough. Once he arrived at the new place, Roth would again come across as charming and well-meaning as possible to his roommates, and talk himself up quite a lot. Also, Americans can sometimes be a sucker for an English accent. And by the time the mask slipped, Roth would turn nasty, issue threats, and vanish into the hazy crowd of millions in Los Angeles. He would be difficult to track down, given he had no fixed address. And even if a person called the police, Roth wasn't the only deadbeat roommate performing this scam in LA. And because there often wasn't any official paperwork, usually the scammed roommate wouldn't even bother contacting the police, and they just bore the financial loss of a few hundred or a few $1,000. Occasionally, Roth would hit the jackpot and hook up with a girl romantically, and stay at her apartment for a few weeks or months, leeching off her finances. Slowly, Roth developed a preference for targeting vulnerable and trusting young women. They couldn't physically threaten him, but he could physically threaten them. And assuming they were straight, he'd also be able to make full use of his looks to manipulate them. This became a pattern. He also seems to have gotten off to it a little. Yet even if Roth could live in Los Angeles rent-free, he still needed money for clothes, food, and travel, not to mention to buy a taste of the high life, which he seemed to enjoy quite a bit. The money he had scammed off his grandmother had long since been spent. And so, Roth developed his other calling card: charity and investment scams. Between 2002 and 2005, Roth invented the following charities and companies. Our Planet Retreats, which sold non-existent spherical eco-friendly homes that theoretically could be set up in the forest, each costing thousands, but which would never be delivered. Blood Rose, an environmental charity that wound up doing nothing for the environment. Our Planet UK, a sustainability charity that purported to help other companies make the green transition, not to be confused with another small legitimate group that now uses the name today. Global Nomads, a website Roth intended as the eco-friendly rival to TripAdvisor, also not to be confused with a plethora of legitimate companies that use the name. Global Energy, which boisterously claimed to work to solve the climate crisis by developing sustainable energy solutions. And the White Orchid Foundation, one of Roth's most enduring scams, which claimed to rescue child sex slaves from captivity. All these organizations were figments of Roth's imagination. And, in these early days, all of these charities and businesses had a staff count of one person, Roth himself. Regardless of the organization in question, the scam was the same. Roth would schmooze his way into polite company. He claimed that he ran one of these organizations and vomit tall tales of his exploits there, and speak passionately about the difference he wanted to make in the world. Many people found Roth's approach quite credible. The Englishman was just so earnest, so charming, yet so soft-spoken. If Roth was in the company of people without much money, but afflicted with a bad case of the Californian bleeding heart, he'd ask for a small donation of a couple $100. But if Roth managed to forge a temporary friendship with an LA citizen with a bit more disposable income, he'd ask for a larger donation in the thousands or tens of thousands. Or, in the case of his profit-seeking companies like Our Planet Retreats and Global Nomads, Roth would ask for the rich person to invest. They'd be turning a profit while helping out the world, after all. Sometimes Roth would back up his story with a bit of literature or some glossy pamphlets, or falsely claim he'd been featured in such and such a magazine or newspaper. When he could be bothered, Roth would also set up a website. At this stage, it was usually a shoddy website from GeoCities or another free service. The bar wasn't that high for websites back in the early 2000s, especially for charities and small businesses, so to many people, it looked legit. Roth even went so far as to register some of his companies with the United States government, something he had no right to do, since he did not have a visa to do any commerce or charity of any sort in America. Other times he would register the bogus company in the UK in order to mimic some semblance of legitimacy. In short, Roth would do whatever he needed to do, in short of some actual honest fucking work, in order to separate people from their money. By the time people started asking Roth questions about what his charity actually was doing with their funds, or if an investor came looking for a quarterly report or some returns on their investment, Roth would be long gone, busily conning another social circle. If investors chased him, Roth would give a bunch of excuses about why the payout was delayed, or make promises for prompt repayments soon, before cutting off relations, changing his phone number and email, and disappearing. On the rare occasion when an investor caught him and forced Roth to pay, he'd simply con someone else for a similar amount in a Ponzi-esque maneuver, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Usually, however, this wasn't necessary. These weren't particularly complex or nuanced scams. They were just brazen. A rapid blitzkrieg of bullshit. And then, once the dust had settled, Ryan Roth was already gone. In combination with the fact Roth didn't pay a dime in rent, the charity and investment scams netted Roth a few tens of thousands a year. As such, he was able to buy food, go out partying, buy clothes, and purchase some plane tickets. But Roth was by no means making huge sums of money at this point, not even a decent annual income. At the time, Roth cultivated an image of a hippie, a spiritually enlightened bohemian, unconcerned with material things, who just wanted to make a difference in the world. So the fact he came off almost perpetually skint made sense to observers, and it also encouraged the well-meaning to provide the charming Ryan Roth with a bit of personal charity to keep him afloat. There is no question, in these early years, that if Ryan Roth had turned his abilities as a bullshit artist towards some sort of legitimate enterprise, whether it be selling used cars or working for an existing startup or charity, he would have done quite well for himself. He would have easily have made an annual income that was relatively comfortable, without even having to go back to school. But Roth was a compulsive liar. He got off on deceiving and stealing. He craved it. Nothing would be more worthless to Roth than an honest paycheck, no matter the amount scrawled upon it. What he wanted was the con. International douchebag. As busy as Roth was in Los Angeles parting people from their money, between 2002 and 2007, he periodically needed to leave the country so as not to overstay his tourist visa and gain the ire of the United States government. After all, Roth did not wish to be permanently barred from the country, where he hoped to make his fortune. As such, he'd head back to the UK and stay with what few friends he still had there, until they got sick of his mooching and wanted to see the back of him. Roth also allegedly stayed with his brother Danny from time to time. But whenever he was back in the UK, Roth did not contact his mother. He would also make forays into France and pull the same roommate scam as he had in Los Angeles, along with trying his best to scam people into donating to his charities or investing in his companies. Unfortunately, the language barrier caused by Roth's sluggish French and the diminished impact on French ears of his bullshit in English meant that Roth was less successful there. As such, he eventually just began to use France purely as a haven to store the money he had earned elsewhere in French bank accounts. Allegedly, Roth maintains at least one of these accounts in France under a pseudonym to this day. It is believed he gained access to these bank accounts via a Franco-Vietnamese girlfriend who provided the necessary identification. He is also rumored to keep his stolen money in dodgy bank accounts in Singapore and the UK itself. When on break from the USA, Roth would often travel to the Far East. He particularly took a liking to Bangkok, Tokyo, and Bali, and the aforementioned Singapore. When in Asia, he was virtually indistinguishable from the horde of other rudderless, hippie, half-pissed British expats. He'd live cheap, drink and party, laze in the sunshine, engage in adventure sports, and slowly drain the money he had stolen, while he ran out the clock on U.S. immigration. It was on Roth's little forays into Asia that he developed what he called yellow fever, a term which he was particularly fond of and would even use in front of his Asian girlfriends. Roth had already developed a predisposition toward targeting women for his scams. The more naive and insecure, the better. But perhaps Roth perceived, according to his own prejudiced reasoning, that East Asian women were always more submissive than Western women, and were more willing to take him at his word and follow his lead. Roth began to focus his romantic and sexual attentions almost solely upon them. He didn't target cultures. You didn't even need to be from East Asia. You could be an Asian woman who had grown up in the United States. He thought it was about race, not culture. Given Roth's compulsive criminality was ultimately about power, the combination of the monetary thrill with the prospect of dominating a submissive woman created fireworks in his mind. So yes, dear listener, in case you hadn't noticed already, in addition to being a liar and a thief, Ryan Roth is also a bit of a fucking racist. Upon his return to Los Angeles, Roth shifted his efforts from acting to showbiz media, hosting events, writing for magazines, and conducting celebrity interviews, at least according to the autobiographies that were written by Ryan Roth. It was all bullshit. A web bio from the time claims Roth hosted a Q&A with actor Ed Begley Jr., and Q&As with directors Alberto Corral, Zeke Hawkins, and Oscar Torres, and, quote, many, many more. Roth also said he appeared in more than 15 television shows, instead of one shitty reality show, and was sufficiently famous to be invited onto a talk show as a special guest. All lies. Roth also bizarrely claims that, due to his English origins, he was invited to be technical director and lead actor for a Taco Bell commercial featuring cricket. Roth also claims to have worked as an expert consultant on the distribution of Asian films in the United States. And quite laughably, Ryan Roth also claims that he was the founding director of the Santa Catalina Film Festival. A quick Google reveals that the film festival was founded by a gentleman named Ron Truppa in 1929. In reality, of course, all of this was shameless resume padding in order to win people's confidence. Roth's periodic returns to Los Angeles consisted mostly of couch surfing, cheating gullible subletters out of rent money, and preying on the good intentions of Los Angelinos by scamming them into donating to a fake charity or investing in a fraudulent business that made suitable noises about the environment or children or the poor. Roth went nowhere near show business at the time. Even Hollywood apparently wasn't able to stomach Roth's particular brand of bullshit. In 2006, Ryan Roth registered yet another company, Living Legends Limited, another child trafficking charity, and fraudulently listed his grandmother, Dorothy, as company secretary. She had no idea. The company generated a few $1,000s in donations, did absolutely nothing for children, and was shut down in 2009. Naturally, Roth pocketed everything he had been given. In early 2007, while he was staying in France, Roth got in touch with his grandmother and asked her for more money. Dorothy promptly sent her grandson 3,000 British pounds, or 4,000 US dollars, that she could ill afford, even while Roth already owed her many thousands on top of that. My copy of the Western Union form has Roth's signature on it, which is then crossed out and replaced with his French alias, Daniel Bernard. Roth also got into contact with his mother Sheena after a 6-year absence, and asked her for money as well. Naturally, Roth promised to pay Sheena back. He did not. And because Sheena wasn't exactly flush with cash, she eventually had to ask her boss at the old folks' home for a loan so she could pay her rent. Sheena also had to go a couple weeks skimping on groceries in order to save the money to promptly pay back her boss what she owed. In other words, his own mother literally went hungry for her lying little turd of a son. In 2007, Roth flew down to the Southern Hemisphere and spent some time in New Zealand, where there is little information about his movements. Roth then moved on to Australia, where he settled in Sydney. Roth met a girl named Gladys, and he started up a relationship with her. Roth gave her his usual flannel about being a charity worker. His scam of choice was quickly becoming the White Orchid Foundation. Within weeks, Gladys was utterly smitten by the tall, noble, and charming Englishman, from his boy band haircut to his meticulously cultivated designer stubble, right down to the scar from a dog that he claimed he had bravely gotten from a Cambodian pimp's knife. Roth ran up his debts from lavish spending on Sydney nightlife and was in mounting arrears for not paying any rent for where he was staying. Roth explained his precarious financial situation to Gladys and how his sex slave charity had eaten up most of his liquid funds. Roth convinced Gladys to temporarily take on his debt until he could pay her back. Gladys promptly did so, and then Roth disappeared. Gladys was saddled with a debt approaching $10,000. Naturally, she was devastated to find out that the man she had cared for so deeply would not only abandon her, but would callously exploit her trust. While in Sydney, Roth got into contact with an elderly woman who collected rare coins as a hobby. Posing as a fellow collector, Roth sold the woman, who was by no means rich, a rare coin he claimed was worth 8,100 Australian dollars. Naturally, the coin was a fake. The old woman had just spent part of her life savings on something that was completely worthless. When she discovered the fraud, she contacted the police. Roth was summoned by the cops for questioning. But instead of going, he skipped out and left the country. I've confirmed with Wayne Hutchinson, the officer who is in charge of the investigation, that warrants are still out in Australia for Roth's arrest. In response to how Ryan Roth treated Gladys, in 2008 an Australian man, whom we shall simply call George, launched a now-defunct website, webscammers.net, to expose Roth. George spent a considerable amount of time looking into him, many of the fraudulent companies he had created thus far. George also rumbled the fact that Roth had not graduated from the University of Southampton and did not have a PhD. He even managed to pinpoint Roth's movements, figuring out that after leaving Australia, he eventually would wind up in Los Angeles again. All updates on Roth were posted to webscammers.net. George then followed Roth's unfolding scams and contacted those businesses and individuals where he could, warning them that Roth was a con artist and not to trust him or do any business with him. This was a significant thorn in Ryan Roth's side. One can still see in the earliest posts on Ryan Roth's Facebook page that the con man claims he was at war with a quote-unquote critic and a rat. George received numerous emails from Roth, threats of violence, threats of legal action, and when he somehow got George's phone number, he even left some creepy voicemails. Roth also filed a police report against George with Scotland Yard in the UK, alleging harassment. He couldn't exactly file a complaint in Australia, however, given that Roth was a wanted man. Over the course of 12 months, George and Ryan would talk to each other via public posts on their respective websites. Ryan insisted that George was the brother of an ex-girlfriend of his, a murderer, and in one public post implied he was a member of a Christian cult, opposed to Roth's work rescuing sex slaves in Asia for some reason. Regrettably, George stopped posting updates to his website, and the page is only available today on the Wayback Machine. This was 17 years ago, and it must have been frustrating for George to watch as Roth continued to get away with his crimes for years. By the way, this seems an opportune time to mention a tip line. Catch Ryan at hotmail.com should this video get seen by a great many people and the power of the internet be brought to bear. Internet sleuths, do your thing. The Wolf of White Orchid. Meanwhile, Roth was busy with his White Orchid scam, aka rescuing child sex slaves from brothels. In a series of blog posts, Roth set about building the charity's credibility. Starting in June of 2007, he wrote at length about the beauty of Sword Island in the Philippines, where he supposedly intended to build an orphanage/school that would house the children he rescued from brothels all over Asia. He posted pictures and claimed he was conducting a topographical survey of the island. All of the pictures taken of Sword Island are from another website, and they even bear the other website's watermark, rather than being taken by Roth himself. He claimed to be in charge of multiple teams of architects, and he fabricated praise from fictional childcare experts, which Roth published on his site, loudly endorsing his island idea. He also claimed that the charity had a board of directors, including a journalist, a doctor, an entrepreneur, and, glory of all glories in his mind, a fashion model. Then, in September 2007, Roth posted his own quote-unquote design for the school. It really is fucking laughable. It looks like something a 12-year-old would cook up in an afternoon on Microsoft Paint. On May 13th, 2008, while posing as a non-existent member of White Orchid's staff, Roth made a post decrying, quote, a number of pedophiles who were spreading slander about, quote, the chairman, aka Roth, and said that, quote, one of them is a known murderer, a British soldier who has killed illegally. These imaginary kitty fiddlers were apparently telling people that Ryan Roth was a con man, that he was masquerading as a doctor, and that White Orchid was a giant scam. Evidently, George from webscammers.net was getting under the skin of our intrepid little shitheel. Roth concluded the post by saying, with a dollop of dollar store wisdom, quote, this just goes to show the links to which files will go. Then, on the 18th of June, Roth posted again. He claimed at this point that White Orchid had received only $600 in donations from the public, 100 of which they had refunded. Roth then went on to again denounce the gang of pedophiles who were trying to shut him down. Roth claimed that he, the chairman, had been harassed by this gang for a number of years. Roth then summons forth some stirring and inspiring words, no doubt on par with Churchill's finest hour. Quote, why will he not simply run away when he gets harassed so much? Because pedophiles will not stop this organization. We have an island, and the pedophiles cannot take this away from the Foundation. We do not care what they try to do. As for White Orchid only receiving $600 in donations, this is not true. Over the course of the Foundation's lifespan, Roth managed to steal at least $100,000 in donations from well-meaning people, mostly in the United States, and perhaps as much as $500,000 or $770,000 in modern money. And the scores would only get larger. In a particularly despicable episode, at one point, under the auspices of White Orchid, Roth also promised to fund a legitimate Cambodian orphanage to purchase equipment, supplies, and even entertainers for the kids. The orphanage went ahead and spent the money. Then Roth paid zilch and left a third world orphanage with the bill. The move is particularly senseless, given that Roth gained no money from the lie. In addition to the rest of his jet-setting and misery-making in 2007, Roth spent some time chilling out in Thailand. A tipster from Reddit allegedly encountered him there. I haven't been able to verify this particular story, but as you'll see, it has one particular mark of authenticity, the use of the nickname Rambo Ryan. And in general, it sounds true to form. The tipster's impression of Roth was that he desperately wanted to be rich and respected, but he also observed that Roth was extremely lazy. The tipster rented a workshop in Thailand for his business. He allowed Roth to set up his own headquarters there for White Orchid. Roth showed up, drank, and sat around. He tried to coax the tipster into a game of table tennis and kept interrupting his work with chatter and some, quote, disgusting jokes involving the sexualization of women. Just the sort of trait you'd want in a chairman of a foundation for the victims of sex trafficking. The tipster told Roth to get out and to never come back. Nevertheless, over the coming weeks, Roth apparently bombarded him with dozens of business ideas, 3 emails a day. One proposal was to start a business where investors could sink money into a person's university education, and then the investor would get, say, 10% of that person's future earnings in perpetuity. The tipster replied, Ryan, you do realize that you can't trade in human beings? That's slavery. The tipster also claimed that he knew a person whom Roth had scammed for $50,000, or $77,000 in modern money. He was also astonished when Roth claimed that on his private island, the former child sex slaves, most of whom would be female, would be tended to by an entirely female staff, and that Ryan Roth would be the only male allowed on the island. Given what we know of him, that is not at all a creepy detail there. As mentioned, the Reddit post has one particular mark of authenticity. It claims that Roth tried to give himself the nickname Rambo Ryan for his daring rescues of children from child brothels. And we know from other witnesses that Rambo Ryan was a nickname that Roth had tried to give himself time and time again. I don't know why. It's a shitty nickname. The American Dream Revisited. In the autumn of 2008, Ryan Roth returned to Los Angeles and resumed his usual activities of apartment hopping and scamming people with fake charities and businesses. But Roth still had dreams of becoming famous, so he occasionally sniffed around showbiz functions when he could. One of them was a photo shoot for an all-Asian female band, Nylon Pink, which described its own style as Hello Kitty on acid. I think you can imagine why Roth felt drawn to the shoot. He lingered in the background and chatted with some of the crew. At the end of the photo shoot, the bassist, Kat Lee, suggested they all go to the strip club. That is where Roth started chatting with Karen Jin Beck, whose stage name was DJ Shy. While the rest of the band was standard guitars, bass, and drums, DJ Shy manned the turntables to add an extra dimension to the music. Because I've got two Karens in LA in this story, chronologically close together, you'll forgive me if I just refer to Karen Jin Beck as DJ Shy. She and Roth hooked up that night, and they proceeded to hook up several times in the following weeks. According to Shy, she didn't want anything serious, but Roth kept bombarding her with phone calls to the point she told him to back off. It was getting annoying. Then one day, Roth called Shy and said he was sick and asked her to come over. She did, and found him on the floor of his apartment, surrounded by a bunch of sleeping pills. He had evidently attempted suicide, though in retrospect, it seems doubtful the attempt was genuine. Roth would go on to threaten several suicide attempts as a manipulation tactic. Either way, being a fairly empathetic human being, DJ Shy was hooked. Roth was like a little lost puppy. She started to look after him, and they grew closer and closer, eventually starting a relationship. In mid-December 2008, Roth applied via Craigslist to stay in my friend Karen's apartment. He met us on December 13th and regaled us about his activities with White Orchid and boasted about how he wanted to be British Prime Minister one day. Once, when Karen and I were dropping off some boxes at the house, I saw DJ Shy floating around. I didn't get a chance to speak to her. 5 days after I met Ryan Roth, he sold a laptop he'd stolen from the place he'd been couch surfing at previously. About a week later, on Boxing Day 2008, Roth claimed he was out feeding the homeless. He was not. The next few months, Roth spent in Karen Stapley's house, not paying rent and drinking cheap wine. On Facebook, however, he wrote that he was putting together a major charity event, importing volunteers from overseas that he would host in Los Angeles. It was quite the contrast between truth and fiction. While Roth's existence was actually a fairly lazy and dismal one, on Facebook, he posted a highly delusional downpour of career milestones. The updates are so rapid and nonsensical, they clearly were the product of an unsound mind. In April 2009, he was a scriptwriter, claiming to be working on a screenplay, and he claimed that he had joined the Screenwriters Guild. That same week, he simultaneously claimed to be involved in producing a movie, a TV show, and a music video. In the exact same week as the above, Roth also claimed that he was made co-host on a local LA radio show. In reality, it was his girlfriend, DJ Shy, who had a day job in LA radio. A few days later, Ryan Roth registered himself for an online competition for the world's top changemakers out of National Geographic, presumably off the back of all the fictional child sex slaves he'd rescued and housed on his private island. He did not win. In June 2009, Roth claimed he had booked a role in an independent film, playing an English auctioneer and villain. To my knowledge, no such film exists. In July 2009, Roth said he booked a script meeting with HBO. Alas, nothing came of it. A week later, he claimed to be filming a TV show of his own creation that would be seen by, quote, millions on U.S. national television. In August, Roth claimed that he was accepted to the Screen Actors Guild. 8 days later, He was supposedly invited to go on the Tyra Banks show. By November 2009, Roth had just finished filming his first documentary feature and was turning to direct his first reality TV show about female dancers. During this time, Roth booked a couple acting gigs, legitimate acting gigs, as a background extra and so forth. In order to get paid for these jobs, Roth fabricated a social security number. But in the autumn of 2009, the IRS got in touch, saying that Roth's number was invalid. DJ Shy told him he couldn't take acting gigs anymore. So instead, Roth conned his way into becoming her manager, which essentially allowed him to leech off the living she was already making, while pretending to be a big Hollywood mover and shaker. Accordingly, in November 2009, Roth started his own talent agency, Roth Management, which at the time claimed to service young Hollywood actors and musicians. Roth regularly lied about various celebrities being his clients, and also lied about his company being featured in various magazines. Meanwhile, my friend Karen finally tracked down DJ Shy on Facebook. Karen informed Shy that Roth had skipped out on owing $2,600 in rent and stole a bunch of her stuff and her roommate's car and checkbook. Karen also told DJ Shy about George's website, webscammers.net, which recorded many of Roth's various scams in Australia and his activities with White Orchid. DJ Shy replied to Karen's message, saying, quote, "I will try to call you. I do have my suspicions as well." The jig was up. A few days later, Shy wrote again. "Ryan was present when I was trying to read your last message, so I did not finish. I also deleted your number." Shy asked Karen to email her using a sender name that Roth would not recognize. She added, "I have to be careful because we are at Coffee Bean right now, and he's online across from me. I have to delete our emails once I finish reading them." It would seem, from all this, that Roth was trying to monitor his girlfriend's communications. A month later, things came to a head. DJ Shy found out that Roth had cheated yet another landlady at the next apartment he was staying at, not paying a dime in rent. So the landlady changed the locks. This prevented Roth from being able to retrieve his stuff. The landlady sent the stuff to the police. They found a duffel bag full of credit card numbers and slips of paper listing PayPal accounts. At this point, DJ Shy told Karen she was in favor of getting Roth deported back to the UK. But 2 weeks later, DJ Shy wrote Karen again. She had completely changed her mind about things. "I believe in a higher power, so I put it in destiny's hands. If Ryan was meant to go to jail, the police would be there to arrest him, and he would be out of my life. If the police let him go, I would help him." Roth had spun DJ Shy a bunch of bullshit about he committed his crimes because his mother had him out of wedlock, and how he grew up poor and how his biological father had rejected him. Roth said he cracked when his dear beloved grandfather died, and he didn't attend the funeral. Roth also claimed that he was alienated from his mother, Sheena, and they hadn't spoken for years. In reality, Roth had resumed contact a couple years back to badger Sheena for some money. Nevertheless, operating under that fiction, DJ Shy encouraged Roth to reach out to his mother, and Sheena began sending them care packages composed of shortbread, Cadbury chocolates, and Roth's favorite ketchup-flavored potato chips. Meanwhile, Shy reimbursed Karen the $2,600 in rent money which Roth owed out of her own pocket. She told Karen that Roth had turned over a new leaf and was going to pursue a legit career. According to DJ Shy, Roth took down all of his fraudulent charity and business websites and moved in with her and her male roommate, Dawn. It turns out Dawn was furious at this because he had already been told that Roth was a con man, and now he was being invited to live with this guy. According to DJ Shy, in a strange occurrence, a few months later, Dawn and Shy's friends set Roth up on a hidden camera TV show to see if Roth would cheat on his girlfriend when a paid actress threw herself at him. Apparently, Roth didn't take the bait. DJ Shy said, quote, "For the next couple years, Ryan and I helped each other grow and develop." Indeed, from 2009 to 2012, while Roth managed DJ Shy's career, they did their best to become famous. Throwing caution to the wind and ignoring his lack of a work visa, Roth started auditioning for acting gigs again. He and Shy tried out for a psychic TV show pilot, where during filming, Roth got angry and cussed out the psychic when she claimed to have summoned the ghost of Roth's dead grandfather. In 2010, they got bit parts as reenactors in the cheesy Spike TV program called 1000 Ways to Die. In 2011, Roth and Shai submitted a video to the YouTube channel American Pranksters, where Roth gives Shai some flowers and a supposed box of chocolates. Roth proceeds to lock DJ Shai in the car while she opens the box, which actually contained a bunch of giant hissing cockroaches. DJ Shai screams, tosses the roaches onto herself, and Roth stands there laughing at her. The video is still up, and at time of writing, has 6.3 million views. In 2012, Roth and Shai released a promo stinger for a reality show they were trying to get afloat, based around DJ Shai's music career. She narrates the thing, and Roth is featured heavily as her long-suffering and beleaguered manager. The other female members of the group all have personality traits clearly contrived to generate juicy conflicts. One's naive and over-emotional. Another is promiscuous and cuckolds her boyfriend. Another is sexually aggressive and a lesbian who hits on the other girls in the group. Another is argumentative, and so on and so forth. One of the girls in the promo trailer actually calls Roth a tool and asserts that if he wasn't DJ Shai's manager, he would have nothing, and that he was merely sponging off of her. The reality show went nowhere, but all in all, it was a peaceful time in Roth and DJ Shai's relationship. Years later, Shai asserted that, for as long as they were together from 2009 to 2012, Roth did not scam anyone. As far as she knew, after 2009, Roth went legit and was enjoying a bona fide career as her manager. The reality was somewhat different. In 2009 and 2010, while Roth was giving every assurance to DJ Shai that he was turning straight and that he had shut down his bogus charities, he was in fact still running the White Orchid Foundation on the sly. Roth even brought aboard a female staff member who wishes to remain anonymous as a volunteer to help him with the organization. The work this woman did actually led her to incur costs of around $1,000, for which Roth said he would reimburse her. He never did. Meanwhile, we do not know how much money Roth stole from donors to the White Orchid Foundation, right under DJ Shai's nose. But the bogus charity was definitely still operating in LA while they were still together. Also in 2009, Roth got back in touch with the former friend who had retrieved him from Ibiza after Roth had escaped from a UK mental asylum. Roth messaged him on Facebook. The two chatted. After 2 days, Roth asked him to invest in a business he had going in Scandinavia, where he was harvesting wood from Norwegian forests to use in sustainable construction projects. The former friend told Roth no, and Roth went quiet for the time being. Periodically, Roth would resurface for a chat. Twice, Roth claimed he was concerned about his own mental health, and he had tried committing suicide multiple times. Every few months, Roth would approach his former friend again with another scam. Each time, he was told no. Eventually, the friend broke off contact. In 2010, Roth got a little creepy. He was hanging around the girls of Nylon Pink all the time, despite only being DJ Shai's manager and no one else's. He got a little bit too flirtatious with the other girls in the band. When they complained to Nylon Pink's actual band manager that Roth was making them uncomfortable, the manager confronted Roth and told him to stop being such a creep. The very next day, Roth anonymously posted on a blog that the band manager had previously had sex with an underage babysitter, and Roth promptly sent the link to all the girls in the band without revealing himself as the source. A few days later, Roth did reveal himself as the author of the post, saying, quote, "I did indeed write the blog about your manager, to teach him a lesson about slander, and how easy it is for someone to post things about you that are in fact not true." After that, Nylon Pink's band manager says, he tried to talk DJ Shai out of being managed by Roth, but, as they say, love is blind. Meanwhile, according to Roth's staffer at White Orchid, he was also cheating on DJ Shai while they were together. Roth would apparently meet other women and tell them his name was Jonathan, or some other alias, and would begin love-bombing them, telling these girls how beautiful they were and how badly he'd fallen for them. Sometimes Roth would forget his alias, and he would accidentally refer to himself as Ryan. In 2011, Roth set up a fake production company, and offered his services to an aspiring actress from Arizona, saying he could make a film for her for a fraction of the normal cost because he was so well connected in Hollywood and could, quote, pull some favors. The actress gave Roth $1,200, and after Roth provided no communication or services for 2 months, the actress informed Roth that they had found someone else to produce the film. The actress then hounded Roth for the money for 8 straight months, but to no avail. Roth's fake production company took in a few additional thousand here and there, which, of course, he pocketed. Meanwhile, DJ Shy, allowing Roth to leech off her as her manager, was not aware of any of this. And all throughout this time, Roth management was secretly taking investors who were lured in by Roth's lies about the famous talent whom he represented and the national newspapers he had been featured in. Naturally, Roth pocketed the cash and offered no returns on these investments. At the beginning of 2012, United States immigration finally got onto Roth's case. He had outstayed his tourist visa by several years, and he had been working illegally without paying any taxes. Roth knew he needed to skip the country. He unceremoniously dumped DJ Shy, with whom he had previously discussed marriage and kids. Roth, meanwhile, had already lined up another woman from Japan to immediately take her place, a supermodel named Yuki Matsumura, who had been staying in LA for work. Not that DJ Shy was aware Roth had been talking to another woman. Although Roth did not scam DJ Shy directly, he did leech off her income as her manager and live-in partner for 3 years. When you consider that DJ Shy was effectively supporting 2 people, from a certain point of view, Roth had drained her of 3 years' income. Nevertheless, Shy remained sympathetic to Roth and had no idea that he continued scamming people until his name hit international headlines in 2020. When interviewers came knocking, DJ Shy said, "I honestly am rooting for Ryan. It seems like he needs constantly to start over, especially when someone from the past would contact his associates." She retained a friendly correspondence with Roth for several years between 2012 and 2020, as he spoon-fed her a bunch of bullshit via email about the next leg of his incredible career. And by incredible, of course, I mean not credible. The Art of Nothingness. After Roth fled America at the beginning of 2012, he dropped off the radar for a few months, eventually resurfacing in Tokyo, Japan in August of that year. By that time, Roth management had transitioned from providing representation to Hollywood's actors and musicians to providing support for painters and sculptors at the cutting edge of the world's highbrow art scene. All indication that Roth management ever represented musicians and actors had been scoured from the internet. The website's entire history was scrubbed and rewritten again from 2012 onward. Suddenly, Roth management was a team of experts involved with art curation, investment advice, private art procurement, art fund management, public relations, and artist career guidance. I'm not sure whether it was the fake law degree or the fake psychology degree that suddenly qualified Ryan Roth as an art expert. The reason for this extensive makeover of Roth management was, in mid-2012, while in Japan, Roth got his claws into a 23-year-old up-and-coming South Korean artist named Min-jae Lee. For once, Roth actually had a real-life high-profile client. Lee was actually a very talented artist with 286,000 followers on Facebook and 29,000 followers on Instagram. Lee primarily produced sketches and paintings of beautiful women adorned with brightly colored and intricate patterns that held an otherworldly quality. Roth managed to fool the young man into thinking that he was an art expert of substance and that it would be a good idea to let Roth management represent Lee's art career. Min-jae Lee signing on with Roth was probably one of the best legitimate things to happen in Roth's entire working life. He immediately began billing himself as a mover and a shaker within elite art circles. He claimed to have been chosen by Observer newspaper in the UK as one of the top 500 future global influencers, even going so far as to put the logo from that award onto his various websites. A moment's research reveals that the Observer has no such award. Roth also photoshopped himself onto several magazine covers to also put on his various websites. He claimed that he was personally featured in articles in The Economist, New York Times, The Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, and Japan Today, and, quote, many, many more. The Japan Today one was actually legit. It was a small article posted online with several user comments calling Roth a fraud. Roth then attempted to censor these comments and threatened in the comment section everyone with legal action. A few months after Roth management signed Min-jae Lee as their client, Roth managed to close a deal with a major Japanese hotel chain, where copies of Lee's art, along with a few originals, would be displayed in the hotels at various locations around the country. Again, this was a legitimately good deal and a step in the right direction. Though, to be fair, this had less to do with Roth's skill as a negotiator than the fact that Lee already had a reputation as an artist, and the hotel chain was already interested from the start. The deal itself was also worth only a few $1,000, from which Roth took his commission and embezzled a little bit extra that Lee was not aware of. Signing a legit client allowed Ryan Roth access to the art world. He floated around other well-known artists in Japan, attempting to sign them to Roth management as well. Most of the time, he failed. They already had competent representation. And when Roth could not convince an artist to sign with him, he'd either claim he'd interviewed them, as opposed to just meeting them at a cocktail party or showing up at their studio, or else he'd lie that he was associated with them in some way, for instance, that he was planning a documentary on their work. Nevertheless, in order to gain some legitimacy in the Tokyo art scene, Roth needed to be more than just a piddling agent. Therefore, Roth Management established its subsidiary company, Roth Galleries. Within a couple of strokes across a keyboard, our intrepid Conman became the curator of a fashionable art gallery amid the bright lights of Tokyo. Naturally, the gallery itself did not exist, and Roth did not own any Tokyo real estate. But proclaiming the existence of Roth Galleries was enough to start courting investors and even applying for government grants in both Japan and the UK. Roth was willing to lie about the experts he had aboard, the backers who had already signed on, and the artists he had on retainer, along with lying about pretty much anything else associated with the project. As a result, Roth was able to ask for large amounts from potential investors. There is some indication that he was successful, since the money he pocketed allowed him to live the high life in Tokyo for roughly a year. In order to supplement his income, in 2013, Roth established himself as CEO of a fake company, Vagabond World Limited, registered in the UK. It was a firm that offered a bizarre mixture of services, from graphic design, branding consultations, artist management/representation, and expertise in solving the issue of world poverty. What the company actually did seemed to vary greatly according to what investor Roth was targeting. The company took in approximately $100,000 in investments, did nothing, paid out nothing, and was quietly shut down 2 years later. The year 2013 proved to be a high point of Roth's entire legitimate career. Not only did he keep spinning Min-jae Lee a line of bullshit to keep the talented young artist as a client, Roth also managed to sign Kenta Matsuyama, an artist who had created a collection of images in protest of the Japanese government's nuclear policy in the wake of the Fukushima disaster. Matsuyama was making something of a national and international splash at the time due to his artwork's topical nature. Roth won him over by promising Matsuyama pride of place in his new art gallery. Roth made the same promise to Min-jae Lee. Of course, Roth Galleries did not actually have a gallery. Nevertheless, in September 2013, Roth put on 2 exhibitions. Matsuyama's exhibition, 281 Anti-Nuke, was held in a rented conference room at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. Free wine and food was provided. Roth gave a little speech in which he denounced the pro-nuclear Japanese right wing and claimed to be friends with London Mayor Boris Johnson. Min-jae Lee's exhibition was held on the 47th floor of a skyscraper in Chidome, Tokyo, with a stunning view of Tokyo Bay. Roth implied to some of the attendees that the swanky place was his personal property. In reality, it was a conference space available for rent. That didn't stop Roth from blabbering onto a magazine about how he planned to purchase 2 more locations. Pictured with Roth at both of these events was Yuki Matsumura. She was a Japanese supermodel, already with a significant amount of success in her career. Back in LA, Roth had targeted her to be his next long-term girlfriend. They had met online in January 2012 via a website called Small World, and then met in person when she was in LA. Willowy, graceful, with classical good looks, Yuki was in fairly high demand in Europe, America, Japan, and Southeast Asia. There is one picture of her in particular, draped in a kimono with flowers in her hair, that bizarrely has become a template design for tattoo artists around the world whenever someone requests a quote-unquote geisha girl to be permanently emblazoned on their skin. Not that the actual photo depicts a geisha. A self-professed introvert, with an interest in cooking and reading scholarly books, with a very reserved nature and a gentle set of mannerisms, Yuki Matsumura was exactly the sort of woman Roth thought he could deceive and bully. He swiftly set about advertising how charming, successful, and intelligent he was. Yuki also recalls how Roth was, quote, easy on the eyes. Unfortunately, Yuki Matsumura's fate would be far worse than what DJ Shai's had been. When I asked Yuki when she first realized something was wrong with Roth, she replied, quote, that's the thing. There were many things when I think about it now, but it's very difficult for me to talk about because I was romantically involved with him. You can never understand what it feels like when you haven't dated a person with a sociopathic tendency. Of course, there were the big events, like Ryan getting engaged to a Thai girl when we were still dating, or giving me fake engagement rings twice. But it's always the little things he did that haunt me more. I still sometimes stay up late at night thinking about it. She recounted how Roth didn't seem particularly interested in sex, briefly leading her to suspect he was gay. And when they did make love, he would bizarrely stare down into her face the entire time, smiling as he thrusted. Yuki Matsumura worked for Roth Management for free, trying to hook him up with Tokyo artists. Yuki also alleges that he had a female benefactor in Miami named Brittany, giving him money for some reason. I can only speculate how Roth was conning this mystery woman, if she existed at all. It might just have been a cover for his other frauds, a plausible explanation to Yuki as to where all the money was coming from. Yuki Matsumura found it odd that Roth would frequently just lie around her apartment, despite being a supposed captain of industry. Quote, I don't think he worked much. He told me he was making good money from an artist called Min-jae Lee. And that was that, apparently. Meanwhile, Kenta Matsuyama, the anti-nuke guy, dumped Roth Management not long after his gallery exhibition in September 2013. Allegedly, Matsuyama threatened to sue Roth if he ever mentioned his name in connection with his own, or any of Roth's fraudulent companies. I do not know exactly how their relationship broke down, but I'm sure we can all guess. Min-jae Lee stayed on for a while longer, though Roth seems to have done little or nothing to advance his career after the exhibition. Meanwhile, in December 2013, Roth lied that he had been contracted to do a huge art curation at a gallery in Hong Kong. I can find no evidence of this anywhere. He also claimed to have been hired as a city planning expert by the UK government, as well as being hired as a consultant in Tokyo for a city regeneration project. And that's all in the same f***ing month. On March 9th, 2014, Roth again used the 47th floor in downtown Tokyo as his fake gallery, this time to show off the paintings of Koji Yoshioka, whom Roth claimed to have discovered the previous year. In reality, Koji was an elderly veteran artist who was well known in art circles across Tokyo. Roth discovered nothing. At any rate, Koji smelled a rat and had very little to do with Roth after the exhibition. After March 2014, Roth galleries nominally remained in operation, but never did anything of substance ever again. I can find no evidence of another big show. I cannot find any evidence of Roth signing another major artist. Min-jae Lee finally came to his senses in February of 2015 and dumped Roth as his agent after a year and a half of nothing but promises. There were also arguments about Roth embezzling money. After that, Min-jae Lee wanted nothing to do with Roth ever again. Once Lee departed, Roth Management and Roth Gallery's entire business model consisted of posting artwork ripped from other artists, other galleries, and other Facebook pages on Roth's social media. From 2015 to the end of 2016, there was literally nothing unique or original presented by Roth, the art connoisseur. Fortunately for him, Roth had already moved on to other things. He had discovered the conference circuit. Overnight, Roth became an expert on the subjects of city planning and overpopulation. Roth claimed that he was invited to give talks all over the world, but, quote, limited himself to 4 to 6 talks a year. And he did indeed give a few talks, which are proudly displayed on Roth's social media. But, coming from academia, I can tell you just how desperate some conferences are to recruit speakers. So much so, it's easy for a fraud or a nutcase to slip in. It's a bullshitter's paradise. If you can pull a good conference abstract of a few hundred words out of your ass, and you can bluff convincingly about your CV, qualifications, and background, the organizers seldom check extensively, if at all. Then you can speak at a conference on any topic you like, and a room full of highly educated people will scribble notes and nod. The conference organizers may even invite you to submit an academic article after the conference. And because some academic journals are so desperate for submissions, they might just accept it. And so, in early 2014, Ryan Roth was bragging about how, in the aftermath of a talk he gave, he had been invited to write an academic article on art curation and city planning of between 4,000 and 6,000 words. I'm certain Roth never bothered to do it. I've looked for it on a couple of academic research databases, and I can't find any signs of it anywhere, which is a shame. I could have used a laugh. Meanwhile, the conference circuit allowed Roth to cloak himself in legitimacy, suddenly, without having any qualifications in the subjects he was talking about, and not having the barest glimmer of professional experience. He was a world authority by simply standing at a podium and running his mouth. And when Roth spoke at a conference, suddenly his social media said it was a keynote address that was televised nationally. And when Roth sat on a discussion panel, he was supposedly rubbing shoulders with Nobel Prize winners, politicians, and members of the World Economic Forum. And when it comes to the conference circuit, the more you do, the less often people will question your qualifications. Legitimacy begets legitimacy. Having a bunch of conference presentations under his belt made it easier for Roth to pad his CV and further impress investors in his next ventures. It gave him an air of professionalism that finally allowed him to land the bigger fish. In 2014, Roth founded 2 more companies. A fake environmentally conscious travel company called Nobel Remix, playing off his false conference connections, and one called Endo, a global brand strategy group. Yuki designed Endo's website for him, and Roth hired her friend, Monica, to work with him. Suddenly, Roth became an expert in advertising. He lied rather recklessly that Endo was a Fortune 500 company, despite it only existing for all of 5 minutes. Roth claimed Endo worked with big established corporations, as well as many small startup companies. With the startups, Roth would not take a fee, but would take part of that company's future equity in perpetuity. He made them sign a contract. That way, by providing the startup company with minimal support and some bullshit advice, Roth essentially bought shares in multiple companies, granting him a share of their revenues going forward. Even with small startups, this amounted to a fair amount of cash, provided they survived for a few months or longer. And the only real work Roth put in for his clients was to occasionally mock up a company logo or catchphrase on his computer while he was sitting around Yuki's apartment in his pajama pants. In 2014, Roth's scams brought in revenues and investments on the scale of $200,000 or more in that single year alone, most of which he spent before the year was out. He blew it on trips, expensive food, and nice clothes. There was actually some logic to Roth's rapid and extravagant spending. If a cheated investor suddenly came along and was able to compel Roth to pay, there wouldn't be much money or assets in Japan to surrender, and he always had the option of skipping the country if they tried taking him to court. In that regard, it also helped that Roth wasn't even his real surname. Together, with his stolen money and Yuki Matsumura's legitimate money, Roth and his supermodel girlfriend were able to live quite well. On the surface, he was a handsome, flash businessman with a beautiful woman on his arm. But it wasn't to last. A family betrayed. On June 7th, 2014, back in England, Ryan's mother, Sheena Flynn, died at the age of 61. The funeral was delayed by the family for 3 weeks because Ryan claimed he simply couldn't get away from work. When Ryan finally was able to come, he claimed that he wasn't able to afford the plane ticket to the UK, and so the family loaned him the money. He didn't pay it back. Ryan's grandmother, Dorothy, and uncle, Sean, were already aware that Ryan was a cheat, and they suspected he might try to pull something in the wake of his mother's death. The funeral party was due to meet at Sheena's house. Roth was given specific instructions not to enter his mother's house until other people had arrived. But when Dorothy and Sean arrived at Sheena's place on the morning of the funeral, Roth was already inside, rifling through his mother's paperwork, hoping to find any bank information that might lead to some money. His uncle Sean, although inwardly angry, said good morning, so as not to cause a scene on the day of Sheena's funeral. It didn't make a difference. Ryan turned around and started screaming at Sean, hurling foam-flecked abuse at him, perhaps because he was embarrassed that he had been caught going through his mother's stuff like the vulture he was. Roth only calmed down when the rest of the family showed up. The funeral service was being held at a church 10 minutes away from Sheena's house, and the entire family set off at the same time. Nevertheless, Roth staggered his own departure and arrived at the funeral service 20 minutes late, so everyone in the church would turn around and watch him make a dramatic entrance. When Sheena was interred in her grave, the family laid bouquets of flowers upon it, except for Ryan, who had not brought any flowers with him. Instead, he laid a single flower on his mother's grave that he had snatched from her garden, spinning the family some douchey line about how the act was symbolic. And, in a way, his lazy act of thievery was symbolic. When the family returned to Sheena's house for the wake, they were invited to take little ornaments from her house as keepsakes. I believe this was according to Sheena's instructions for her funeral. Ryan's uncle Sean asked for 2 small ceramic Poirot face masks as a reminder of his sister. Suddenly, Roth immediately insisted that they were of deep sentimental importance to him and demanded that he be given them instead. Then the Poirot face masks mysteriously disappeared. Later in the day, when Roth had gone, his grandmother, Dorothy, pulled the masks out of her purse and presented them to her son, Sean. In that regard, Ryan's uncle Sean has given me a message. He says to tell Ryan that he still has the face masks if Ryan would like them back. Of course, in order to claim them, Roth would have to come out of hiding first. That brings us to Roth's betrayal of his own grandmother. Roth had frequently borrowed money from Dorothy between 1999 and 2002 for business ventures that never materialized. These loans added up to about 20,000 British pounds in 2014, or 59 grand in modern US currency. Roth delayed paying his grandmother back for years, pleading poverty. Yet it is pretty clear that Roth could have paid his grandmother back by dipping into any one of his scores between 2009 and 2014. With White Orchid, with Roth Management, with Roth Galleries, with Nobel Remix, with Endo, he was making bank. 20,000 was small change compared to some of the amounts he was ripping off. As it was, Roth only paid his grandmother a couple of small installments, adding up to £350, and left it at that. The year before Sheena's funeral, in 2013, Ryan's grandmother contacted him via Facebook. Dorothy was in declining health. Her doctors were telling her she needed to buy an electric wheelchair and a stair lift for her house. Dorothy's teeth were also not doing well and she needed dental work, and she didn't have any dental insurance. In January, Dorothy wrote desperately to her grandson to coax him to make good on the promises he made to repay her loans years ago. Roth replied he'd try and send his grandmother some money next month. Accordingly, a month passed. Nothing. Roth told his grandmother that he was busy setting up a new travel company and was working 20-hour days and had merely forgotten. He also told Dorothy to look up the Courvoisier Future 500, in which Roth had just been honored. The claim was bogus. Another month went by. In March, Roth claimed he only made $900 that month and had nothing to spare. Later in March, Roth claimed he was bedridden, having pulled his back out and couldn't possibly make an online bank transfer. In June 2013, Dorothy asked for some money again. Roth promised to send her the cash in the next 7 days, saying it had been a tough few months. He then said sarcastically, "I appreciate you not constantly reminding me, as that would have stressed me out. Trying to do my best." Dorothy replied, "Okay, thanks. I would not ask, but things are tight. Nan, XX. Ryan shot back, "Things are always tight, as I owe you a lot of money." 4 months later, in October, Roth sent his grandmother a bank transfer for a whopping £50. He promised his grandmother another £50 in November. Bear in mind that nearly a year had passed since Dorothy had told her grandson that she desperately needed mobility equipment and dental work. Meanwhile, Roth was alternating between living it up in Tokyo as a trendy art gallery owner and hopping over to Thailand with his girlfriend. In December, Roth promised to send his grandmother another 150 quid if a deal he was working on came through. A few days later, Roth told Dorothy he could send her nothing, as he had just lost a huge investment of 55 grand. What that likely means is an investor he had been swindling for 55K had suddenly gotten wise and pulled out. Dorothy continued to message her grandson into 2014. At the end of February, Roth replied, apologizing for not answering her messages, saying he had been busy trying to save the elephants and making an artificial reef for endangered marine life. In April, Dorothy messaged yet again for the money. Roth said he'd be able to do it next month and apologized for any delay. On July 7th, 2014, after Sheena's funeral, Dorothy messaged Roth yet again, quote, "Ryan, did you get my message? I need the money I lent you 12 years ago. Doctor said I need that electric chair and chair to lift me up. Also, teeth need doing. Sorry, but desperate." Roth replied, "Nan, if I had it, I'd give it you. Last month I made £300, and this month nothing so far, as I spent so much time in the UK for the funeral. And no, I did not get your message. Not sure why you are telling me about years ago, as I know this and I've been paying it back when I can, as you know." It is unclear how Roth could possibly even live on £300 for 2 months, even in East Asia, especially in Japan. In fact, according to multiple sources, at the time he was making thousands upon thousands and doing just fine. He simply didn't want to give any money to his grandmother, even though she was skint and desperately needed the cash. Dorothy expressed her consternation that Roth could be so short on funds, since he had previously claimed his clients paid for his airfares everywhere. Dorothy added, "When you say you will get the money soon, do you mean next week or next month? So I can order the items I desperately need. Nan." Roth merely replied that, "I'll have it when I have it." 2 weeks went by, and Dorothy messaged plaintively, "Do you think you will be paying me this year? I'm getting desperate." Roth replied, "Nan, I don't know how to explain this to you anymore. If I predict when, and it does not happen, what will I do then? You're asking me to lie to you. Would you like me to lie to you? Also, I get the impression Uncle Sean is looking at me online. Best for him to stop that now. He's nothing to me, and I'm nothing to him." In September 2014, after Roth had been posting pictures of himself on Facebook, jetting around Southeast Asia, going to beaches, encountering exotic wildlife, and dining at fancy restaurants, Dorothy wrote, "Glad to see you seem to be living it up. Perhaps you can afford to send me some money." Roth replied, "I thought this would come from you. Living it up? Sure, if you think I'm paying for the flights, hotels, and meals. I'm really tired of you going on about all this. If you think so little of me, the next time you air the idea of me being a liar, misspelled, by the way, and of me having lots of money, then once I send it to you, that will be it with me. The next message I get like this, then there will be little in a form of relationship between us. I'll try to call you later or tomorrow, but do not even air to me that you think I'm a liar," again misspelled, "ever again." For those of you listening and not watching, he spelled liar L-I-E-R. Dr. Ryan Roth, everybody. At the beginning of January 2015, his Uncle Sean emailed Ryan to get him to pay back the money to his grandmother. Roth owed £20,000, but Dorothy said she would be happy to even get $10,000 back. Sean threatened legal action and pointed out the numerous occasions where Roth had behaved like a piece of shit. scamming a UK student loan and working illegally in Japan and America. Roth wrote back, CCing the police in Cyprus, where Sean was living. Roth claimed to the police that Sean was threatening and blackmailing him on behalf of his grandmother, and he asked them to lay charges on his uncle. Then Roth lied that the last words Dorothy said to him were, "You don't need to pay me back anything." He dramatically declared he would testify as much in court. Roth then went on to cheerfully declare that his grandmother was welcome to sue him in UK small claims court, but, quote, "I imagine it's not free, and this is a long process," knowing full well that Dorothy's lack of funds was the reason for this entire argument in the first place. Roth also lied about the amount that his grandmother loaned him. Although Dorothy had only asked for £10,000 back, Roth said he didn't know his grandmother even so much as $5,000. Roth claimed, all of a sudden, quote, "When I found out that Nan believes I owe her for over £10,000, I was shocked, as I never borrowed this off her." This is total bullshit. The Facebook messages I'm privy to show that not 6 months prior, Dorothy had mentioned the amount that Roth owed her, 20 grand, and he did not dispute it. Roth was merely playing innocent for the policeman he had pointlessly CC'd. Roth then requested that his grandmother go to the bank and ask them to provide proof of how much she loaned him, knowing full well in 2015 that the bank would no longer have records of transactions from over 13 years ago. Roth said he'd happily attend any UK court proceedings should he be given 3 months' notice. Finally, Roth discouraged Sean from contacting any art galleries, donors, or business partners, exposing him as a fraud, claiming what Sean was doing was blackmail and he would be prosecuted if he acted on it. And that, as they say, was that. Dorothy died 4 years later, in February 2019, with Roth not giving her another penny. She gave her son, Sean, instructions to hold a secret ceremony, not involving the wider family, so Roth could not stage the same disgraceful theatrics he had performed at his mother's funeral. Dorothy's last dying wish was to have her ashes scattered on the grave of her daughter, Sheena. Ryan's brother, Danny, who owned Sheena's funeral plot, allegedly refused permission to allow Sean to do this. But Sean basically thought, yeah, f*** that noise, and went ahead and did it anyway. Art, incest, and the Catholic Church. In February 2014, an employee at an art canvas printing studio, Canvas Design, located in Darwin, Lancashire in the UK, made the mistake of uploading an artwork by Min Jae Lee to the small studio's website. At the end of the month, Roth somehow became aware of this and wrote Canvas Design's owner, Conrad McKee, a rather sternly worded email. Roth explained that McKee was in violation of copyright by using Min Jae Lee's work for commercial purposes without the permission of Roth management. Note that carefully. Not the permission of Lee, who actually owned the rights to his own work, but of Roth himself, who owned the rights to diddly squat. He explained to Conrad McKee that he was forced to fine him $10,000 for the copyright violation. Savor that for a moment. 10 grand for posting an image to a small website by mistake. No cease and desist, no takedown order. Just a fine of 10 grand imposed by what Roth claimed was the letter of the law. Roth also threatened that if the case went to court, that typically the total damages he would win amounted to $25,000, in addition to the legal costs McKee would have to pay. In truth, of course, Roth merely wished to discourage the man from going to court. McKee wrote back, and he couldn't apologize enough. He explained that the upload was entirely an error and not intentional. They had downloaded a free online gallery of images from a Russian website that claimed to be copyright-free, but turned out not to be. They had deleted the other images, but apparently Min Jae Lee's work had escaped the purge. McKee told Roth he had fired the employee responsible and assured him that the company had not made a penny off of Min Jae Lee's work and had not printed or sold any of his artwork. Later, speaking over the phone, McKee explained that a fine of $10,000 would finish his already struggling company, and they'd be forced to close down. Roth wrote back and magnanimously offered to reduce the fine from $10,000 to $5,000. He suggested the fine be paid in 2 installments, $3 grand to be paid on March 1st, 2014, only a few days away, and the second installment of $2,000 to be paid, bizarrely, on March 1st, 2015, exactly a year later. Roth added that this was the first time ever that he'd reduced a fine. What a nice guy. McKee thanked Roth for his boundless generosity and said he would pay the first installment of the reduced fine immediately. Roth, as usual, got a few $1,000s for doing absolutely nothing. Money he could have sent to his grandmother, by the way. As a result of the unforeseen expense, McKee placed his employees on 50% of their regular work hours, costing them wages, and thus we can count all of them among the conman's victims. Then Roth decided to expand his little swindle. He came back with a proposal. The $5,000 legally had to be paid, no matter what, but perhaps McKee would like to go into business with him. Roth said he was interested in utilizing McKee's printing services. Roth would select art from his many, many talented clients, and McKee would sell canvas prints of them online and ship them internationally to customers. They'd split the profits 50-50, minus the fee the artist collected. Roth said they'd need a new name for the company, a new website, and Roth demanded that he be in charge of the branding. If McKee accepted the offer, Roth said, he was willing to turn a blind eye to the remaining $2,000 he owed him. In reality, what Roth's business proposal amounted to was, he would send McKee JPEGs of artwork he screenshotted off the internet, pieces he had no right to sell and mostly by artists he didn't even represent, and take 50% of the profits while McKee paid for the printing and shipping costs out of his share. Roth would also pocket the artist's fee. It was a brilliant little swindle that would earn Roth a rolling source of revenue for doing practically nothing. McKee said that he needed about 6 months to save up the necessary capital to start such a company. Roth mocked him and said there was no way that a small fine of $3,000 would put him in danger of going out of business. McKee wrote back, saying that his company was already struggling to find its feet when the fine came through, and offered Roth a discounted rate for printing services while he got the necessary funds together. Roth didn't reply. Over a year later, in November 2015, Roth wrote McKee again, asking about the idea for the business. During that time, McKee had sold canvas designs and was working as parish coordinator for the local Catholic Church. McKee explained he no longer had any access to the printing equipment. He added, "I now work at my local church, which I find far less stressful than canvas printing." Roth replied, with all the charm and subtlety of a mafioso, "You remember how we met? It was unfortunate. The terms of the fine were such that you guys would give us, at cost, print services, and I'm not sure what to do here as you guys have stopped printing. Do we rethink the level of the fine? I'm not mad or annoyed or anything. I'm actually very nonchalant about this, but it's about what is best for the artist." Please note that in November 2015, Roth no longer represented Min Jae Lee, not that he had the rights to any of his artworks in the first place. Roth also mocked McKee for working for the Catholic Church. He strangely advised McKee to, quote, "Read The Origins of Political Order by Francis Fukushima." The idiot actually meant Francis Fukuyama. Then Roth inexplicably added, "Did you know there is no genetic reason to not have relations with your first cousin? Although the church says this is wrong, in Asia it's common practice, or at least accepted." I have no explanation for why Roth brought any of this up. At this point, Conrad McKee stopped replying to him. Meanwhile, in addition to his fraudulent companies, Roth managed to charm the female CEO of a small architecture firm based in the UK into giving him a job as a consultant, given he was such an expert on city planning and overpopulation, of course. Yuki Matsumura has claimed the CEO had a bit of a crush on him. Roth turned around and told everyone he was the global managing director for the firm, in charge of a team of 400 architects working on a 9-month project to design hotels in London, Bangkok, and Shanghai. Around the same time, Roth started claiming that he had supervised a UN infrastructure project in the developing world. Then, in late 2015, with the heat getting too strong from angry investors and disappointed clients in Japan, Roth and Yuki moved full-time to Bangkok, Thailand. There, Roth embarked on a new, ambitious scheme that would steal an unprecedented amount of money in one fell swoop. At this point in his career, spanning the years 1998 to 2015, Roth had stolen approximately $3.3 million, or $4.5 million in modern money. This includes everything from a decade of small-time roommate scams, to petty thefts, to unpaid loans, graduating to donations for fake charities like White Orchid, receiving government grants, and sucking in large investments for his bogus companies. But the biggest, most brazen frauds were yet to come. The Crushed Lotus. In 2016, Roth abandoned most of his activities in Tokyo and pivoted hard toward Bangkok, which he had often visited with his girlfriend, Yuki. The couple settled in an apartment with Yuki's cat, Kabu. The apartment was one of those luxurious buildings that loomed far above the general poverty and squalor of the city. Not that Roth gave much of a damn about the people below. He had a bit of stolen money to burn, and Yuki was always in demand in those days as a model. Money, tropical weather, nice meals, adventure sports, and a beautiful woman. Life was sweet for a time. Roth even began discussing marriage and children, just like he had done with DJ Shy. Then, once Roth's money started to run thin, he launched into his next scam. On May 15, 2016, Roth registered the Malala Coffee Company and launched a Kickstarter campaign. Roth declared the company was, quote, the most ethical coffee brand in the world. Malala would function as a middleman between the big coffee distributors, cafe chains, and the impoverished coffee farmers of the Third World. The farmers would get better pay for their product, which in turn meant they could pay their workers more. The cafes and distributors would get a deal on high-quality coffee beans, which they could then sell at a marked-up price due to the ethical nature of the product. The customer base would presumably pay in order to feel warm and fuzzy. Even further, Roth claimed that Malala Coffee would donate a whopping 70% of its profits to disaster relief, local education programs, environmental conservation projects, and microfinancing to raise the standard of living of third world farming communities. The website for Malala Coffee was designed by a supportive Yuki Matsumura, who had given Roth the idea for an ethical coffee company in the first place. She thought the enterprise was genuine. For Yuki, it was a simple matter of wanting to improve the lives of poverty-stricken farmers across the world. The graphics for the website were done by Yuki's friend, Monica. The results of the Kickstarter campaign were underwhelming. Roth got 55 backers, donating a total of $7,000 USD. This was a piddling drop in the bucket compared to what Roth had been scamming from investors for the past few years. Nevertheless, Roth promised each of these 55 backers a supply of Malala coffee as a perk of the campaign. Meanwhile, the bulk of Roth's money came from angel investors he'd contacted about Malala, who gave Roth between $10,000 and $100,000 a pop for a share of the company's profits, aka the remaining 30% Roth claimed wasn't going to charity. Naturally, he oversold the shares in the company, concealing the investors from each other. Most were told they were the primary backer. Roth also took pre-orders from numerous coffee distributors and cafes who paid up front for the first bulk deliveries of Malala coffee. Depending on the size of the cafe, Roth cleared between $1,000 and $5,000 per bulk order, along with $10,000 plus that he scammed from a couple of larger distributors. This added up to a lot of money, approximately $800,000 or $1.1 million today. Roth transferred these funds to a collection of bank accounts in Singapore, Hong Kong, France, and the UK. Bear in mind that this was 2016, and Roth's grandmother was still alive. He could easily have repaid her the £10,000 she was asking for, or even the £20,000 Roth actually borrowed. In order to make Malala Coffee look more legitimate, Roth hired a friend of his, Aaron Close, as his associate, despite Close having no relevant skills or any knowledge of coffee production. He also hired his friend, Nick Pascal, as his chief operating officer. Roth and Close traveled to a few coffee farms in Thailand to at least keep up appearances that Roth was building up a network of farmers. Close later said, "I did feel after a while that we were sort of cosplaying as businessmen. We had all the finery, we had all the appearance of it, but I was willing to overlook the fact that this guy exaggerates things. Because, every friend has his flaws. And also, there's the possibility that we become billionaires someday." Roth's visits to Thai coffee farmers were fairly piecemeal and superficial. He didn't strike up any deals to buy their produce. Outside of Thailand, Roth did absolutely nothing to establish a network of small-scale coffee farmers in other countries. He simply wrote up a few testimonials from farmers who didn't exist, using pictures he'd ripped off the internet. A cafe or coffee company hoping to hook up with an impoverished coffee farmer would have better luck going through the f***ing phone book than through Malala Coffee. Meanwhile, Roth's biggest source of funding came from one solitary person. During his time in Bangkok, romping about high society as a genius English businessman, Roth cozied up to a young Thai woman named Laksamikan Purli Inkakul. She was the daughter of a high-ranking executive who ran the Miracle Group Hotel Corporation in Thailand. As a result of nepotism, even at the young and inexperienced age of 21, an age when many young women are going to college and waitressing, Purli was made vice president in her father's company. She was later promoted to full-blown CEO and became executive director of a UN program, director of a business leadership program, and head of a tech company. As a result, Purli already had a high net worth independent of her father, and it wasn't long before Roth started sniffing around. He and Purli commenced a sexual relationship, and the sprightly, attractive Thai woman began bankrolling Malala Coffee's startup with large sums of money, which Roth promptly embezzled. All the while, the Japanese supermodel, Yuki Matsumura, had no idea that she was being cheated on. But it is pretty clear that Purli did not appreciate just being Roth's side piece. In a screenshotted text image to Roth, the high-flying Thai business ace said of Yuki Matsumura, "She was just a model who fell in love with you and moved halfway across the world for you. I'm similar to her, though, but I need to get my head out of my f***ing ass, because I don't deserve this. She can stay with her cat in your shitty apartment." This was not the first time Roth had cheated on a girlfriend. He'd reportedly done it to DJ Shy before. And Roth must have been fairly sexually active because, somewhere in the past few years, he had contracted genital herpes. He had not gotten it from Yuki. But apparently, Roth didn't like taking his medication for it, so sores occasionally broke out on his dirty little dick. Meanwhile, numerous times Yuki started to have doubts about a relationship with Roth, but he always managed to bring her around again. Quote, "Whenever he called me a gorgeous creature with his English accent, I always lost the argument with myself that he was no good for me." But in mid-2016, Roth informed Yuki that he was feeling depressed. His mental health was in tatters and he needed some alone time. So, accordingly, Roth asked Yuki to move out of their Bangkok apartment so he could quote-unquote fix himself. In reality, it was so Roth could date Purli, telling the Thai businesswoman that he'd broken up with the Japanese supermodel. Yuki fell for it and complied, out of genuine concern for Roth's well-being. She was left homeless in a foreign country. She began couch-surfing with friends, feeling miserable, but still concerned for Roth's mental state. Meanwhile, Roth couldn't have Purli over to his apartment with Yuki's stuff all over the place, so he put all of her possessions in trash bags and took them to the dump. In summer of 2016, Yuki was camping out at a friend's place in Bangkok when a friend texted her. "You need to check his Facebook," her friend said ominously. Yuki looked at his page. Quote, "It first looked like just a bunch of pictures added to his timeline until I took a closer look. I gazed at them for a while without any expression on my face. I moved my mouth, but no sound came out. After the longest pause, I managed to click each picture he'd posted, and I remember every clicking sound felt like a gunshot." Roth had posted 368 nude pictures of Yuki Matsumura, and many of them he had surreptitiously taken of Yuki without her knowledge. Because Yuki was a model, some of them filtered gradually onto obscure porn sites on the internet. Yuki immediately began reporting the pictures to Facebook for containing sexual content. She felt emotionally bludgeoned. Quote, "I can hardly remember anything after I became a topless zombie walking around with 368 empty bullet holes in my chest. I think all of my blood drained out of me because I went so cold and everything else seemed to feel numb. I didn't know what to do or who to talk to or even how to breathe." When she phoned Roth to confront him, he claimed that he had spiraled into a nervous breakdown and had done it without considering the consequences. He apologized. He said he needed more time alone. A few days later, Roth blocked her on Facebook. Yuki's mental health was in shambles. Her physical health began to seriously decline. Concerned friends contacted her and told her to join them in Europe. Her friends thus rescued Yuki in her spiraling mental state and got her out of the same city as her twisted boyfriend. According to Yuki, quote, "Without them, I'm pretty sure I'd be soaking somewhere in the Indian Ocean right now." Then word came to Yuki in Europe that Roth had thrown her cat, Kabu, out on the street. Yuki clung to her phone for a week as her two friends in Bangkok desperately searched the streets, replete with thousands of stray cats, in order to find Kabu. Miraculously, they did. Yuki phoned Roth, telling him she was returning to Bangkok to get her cat. He screamed hysterically, insulting her all the while, telling her that she was insane and insensitive, and that her return would destroy his precarious mental condition. In reality, it just ran the risk of Pearlie finding out that Roth was still keeping the Japanese supermodel on the line. Meanwhile, Yuki was still in the throes of abusive emotional manipulation by a psychopath. She was confused. She still took his claims of depression seriously. So Yuki apologized and said she'd remain in Europe and wished Roth well. She even knitted him a scarf as a get-well-soon gift. The color Yuki chose was green, to match Roth's eyes. On Yuki Matsumura's birthday in 2016, she was staying in Sweden with her friends Dusa and Robert. Roth called Yuki and wished her a happy birthday. Yuki felt pleased that her depressed boyfriend still took the time, amid all his mental troubles, to remember her birthday and give her a call. Roth and Yuki chatted pleasantly. He asked how she was doing. Yuki had a feeling Roth was coming out of his depression, and that her boyfriend of 4 years would soon return to normal. Roth said, "I just need a little more time alone to fix myself, sweetie." Yuki said that was fine, wished him well, and politely thanked Roth for calling her. The illusion was about to come crashing down. After Yuki hung up, feeling hopeful about the future, her friend Dusa came into the room, looking extremely grave. She held her laptop in her hands. She said, very quietly, "Yuki, you need to see this." On Facebook, Roth had just announced his engagement to Pearlie, the 29-year-old Thai businesswoman who was bankrolling Malala Coffee. There was a picture of a woman's hand with an engagement ring on it, with the caption, "She said yes." To quote Yuki, "I was no more use to him. I no longer was providing him a place to stay after we moved from Japan. I no longer was working for him for free after several years of no payment, and I no longer was beneficial to him anymore. He moved on to a new girl, a daughter of one of the biggest hotel groups in Thailand." Thanks to him, Yuki had just experienced the worst day of her life, and it was her birthday. But the misery didn't end there. Yuki began getting messages from confused friends, mistaking Pearlie's hand in the photo for her own, wishing Yuki congratulations. Yuki replied to these messages with the words, "Thanks, but he got engaged to someone else." When a friend showed Yuki a picture of Pearlie in Forbes magazine, with her then bleach blonde hair, her smoldering gaze, and her stylish, expensive suit jacket, Yuki merely gave a sad smile, nodded, and politely said, "She is beautiful," and slowly closed the magazine. It was only then that Yuki and her friends began Googling and found out about Ryan Roth's long career as a conman and heel. It slowly dawned on Yuki that she was dealing with a psychopath. After recovering from the devastation, Yuki Matsumura eventually returned to Bangkok and collected Kabu from her friends, intent on starting her life without Ryan Roth. The spell was broken, in the most brutal way possible. Yuki resolved that she would have nothing to do with him ever again. Meanwhile, in the autumn of 2016, Roth's scam with Malala Coffee was on borrowed time. Nick Pascal, Roth's COO, later said, "I started to lose faith. Eventually, when he started to bring in a lot of people with, 'Hey, if you throw in some money, you'll get like 3 times the return,' I started to realize this sounded like a Ponzi scheme. Pearlie's father also began to suspect Roth was running a scam, and told his daughter that she had to try to get her money back. The hotel magnate also started putting pressure on Roth as well. This effectively ended Roth and Pearlie's engagement. Meanwhile, angry Kickstarter donors started writing messages. They hadn't got their free coffee yet, or that the bag had arrived but was of extremely poor quality. Roth dismantled Malala Coffee's website, scrubbing it from the internet. Yuki discovered this when she kept trying to log in, continually getting the message, "wrong password." With Roth's engagement to Pearlie over, he declared that he was no longer depressed and told Yuki she could return home. He even lied that someone had hacked his Facebook to post the engagement announcement. This may sound absurd, but Roth's lie was so convincing for some people that a collection of Yuki's friends started to ask her when she was going to take Roth back. Yuki actually lost friends when she refused to do so. Even Duza, the woman in Sweden who had shown her Roth's engagement announcement in the first place, deleted Yuki from her Facebook. Nevertheless, Yuki Matsumura continued to reject the idea of reconciling with Roth, and, as a result, the situation putrefied into something much, much worse. Roth began stalking Yuki, writing her letters, sending her texts, and calling her friends asking for her whereabouts. Obviously, Roth realized he had messed up big time by discarding a kind, supportive girlfriend who was intelligent, well-read, and a supermodel to boot. It was also quite clear Roth's narcissism couldn't handle the rejection, since it shattered his inflated self-image, and he began to unravel. Roth sent Yuki a torrential downpour of gifts to win her back. Every day she would return home to her condo, anxious about whether another package had arrived. Ryan Roth sent Yuki Matsumura the following: soulful, sexy pictures of him, handwritten letters in his childish scrawl addressed to Yuki and Kabu the cat, drawings of Yuki and Roth together, a spare key to Roth's new apartment, flowers, cash, a PlayStation 4, an iPad with a picture of Yuki and Roth as the home screen image, a sweater Roth had sprayed with the scent of his cologne, pictures of his dead mother Sheena, a stuffed bear, an engagement ring, a cookbook, a bag of cat food, a t-shirt with Yuki's name printed on it, a hoodie with cat ears, a pillow with a printed picture of Kabu and Yuki's childhood dog, saying "best mom ever," a USB stick with 23 videos on it of Roth crying selfie style, another USB with a TED Talk on it about how to forgive a cheating husband, a death threat, a side note with legal instructions about what he wanted Yuki to do with his body, which sent her into a panicked search for him across Bangkok, and a jar of Roth's semen with a medical record and a scrawled note. The jizz note read, quote, "I had a test, a fertility test, as I want to have children with you. The first test was just a month after you were in Japan, and it was bad. It freaked me out so much as I couldn't give you what you wanted. I had a second and third test recently, and my sperm is actually very good. So I didn't realize how much that would affect me. I also had a health issue, physically, but that is good now also. Please see me and let me explain myself. And if you still don't want me, I'll go away from you. I'm crying while I write this. X." At this point, Yuki was terrified. Quote, "I started to feel something I never even knew I had inside me. I don't think I ever got depressed, but I saw darkness, with a side of imminent disaster. I think we should all try holding a piece of your ex's semen sample with his uncanny smiling picture in your mailbox, just to see how many seconds it will take until your pulse stops pumping. The next day, I gifted myself a pocket knife, and I've been carrying it ever since." Yuki again fled to Europe. For 2 years, she gave ambiguous answers to her friends asking for her whereabouts. She was more of a ghost than a person. Then she realized she'd been trying so long to not become a victim of Roth that she had begun acting like one. She was leading half a life. So, eventually, Yuki put down roots and began living and breathing again. As Yuki said, "The key to solving problems lies not in isolation, or the right people to hang out with, or any kind of self-help books. It was always in me, Yuki Matsumura, and how she handles any given set of circumstances. One day I will die, and because of that, I have no more time to waste dwelling on what already happened. I want to use all my remaining time living and loving, rather than dying and hating everything I see." It is worth mentioning at this juncture that Yuki Matsumura now leads a fairly blissful and wholesome life in a small town, the name of which I will not disclose, with a new partner and their young son. Meanwhile, on the other end of the moral spectrum, a perfectly wretched and miserable Ryan Roth stayed on in Bangkok for a time. At the end of 2016, speaking to his disgruntled Kickstarter supporters, he announced that he was shutting down the company. He blamed the destruction of Malala Coffee on Brexit and the impact this had on the British pound. Roth offered his customers 3 choices: sit tight until Malala Coffee could get back on its feet. It never did. Immediately get a refund. Roth never returned a cent. Or get all your coffee subscription orders delivered to you all at once. But Roth didn't have that much coffee to dispense, and he didn't send anything. And so ended the world's most ethical coffee company, mutilated at the hands of a liar, thief, and a psychopath. At the same time, Roth was being hounded by Pearlie's business titan of a father. Roth claims that he found a listening device in his phone, and that someone was plotting to assassinate him. And while Roth may be a liar and possibly a delusional paranoid lunatic, it is very true that his adversary this time was a very powerful heavy hitter in Thailand. Not all of his actions against Roth may have been, strictly speaking, legal, allegedly. Regardless of his tactics, no doubt the heat was on. By messing with a spoiled daughter from Bangkok's super rich, Roth had overstepped the mark and placed himself in very real danger. Eventually, Roth was forced to flee the country. He first headed to Tel Aviv in Israel. Not long after, Roth shut down all of his former businesses, including Roth Management, to wipe the slate clean and make it even more difficult for his enemies in Thailand to track him. Then Roth went to ground for a while in a distant, tranquil corner of the world, the island of Bali. It was to be the stage for one of the biggest single frauds of all time, not just in Roth's career, but any career. It was also in Bali where Roth may have, allegedly, found a loyal accomplice for the first time. The Wolf and the Jackal. As 2017 dawned, Roth was keeping a low profile in Bali. He had a great deal of money from his Malala Coffee scam to spend, the modern equivalent of $1.1 million. Bear in mind, in 2017, his grandmother was still alive and still could have used the 10 or 20 grand he owed her for her mobility scooter and some dental work. But instead, Roth went out drinking, clubbing, scuba diving, and yachting for several months, just living it up and sowing his wild oats, meeting and having sex with the occasional Indonesian woman and female tourist of East Asian descent with his mangled, herpes-riddled dick. Roth also joined a prestigious Bali tennis club. There, he met plenty of potential victims. But Roth did not immediately launch into another scam for quite a while. The reason for this was simple. Roth could no longer afford to be splashing himself all over the internet as a business genius and philanthropist with the next great idea for a company that would cure world poverty and make a shit ton of money in the process. Pearlie's father would be looking for him, and Roth didn't want to easily pop up in an internet search. If he did, Roth might be slapped with a criminal or civil court case from Thailand. Or worse, a few well-paid burly gentlemen might make a trip from Thailand to Bali to pay Roth a hostile visit. Allegedly. The brazen Conman had flown too close to the sun. A super-rich and politically connected hotel magnate whose daughter had been duped, dishonored, and humiliated wasn't the forgetting sort. What Roth needed was one more big score. A good, solid scam. Some wealthy victims. A bit of noise. Bit of smoke, and then Roth would disappear. and he'd take off with enough money to keep himself hidden from public view for a good few years, if not for life. The swindle that Roth settled upon wasn't exactly brilliant in its originality. Roth decided that the Malala coffee scam he'd worked in 2016 had been so lucrative in so short a time, netting him the modern equivalent of $1 million within just a few months, that he'd pull it off again, but this time at a far larger scale. The most perverse part of Roth's plan was the name he chose for the sequel to Malala Coffee. He named it Kabu & Co., after Yuki Matsumura's cat. The one that Roth had callously dumped on the street so Pearlie wouldn't see it in his apartment while he was trying to seduce her. The cat which Yuki's friend had found only by a miracle. Perhaps Roth did it out of spite, since Malala was originally Yuki's idea. Or perhaps Roth did it because he was still obsessing over the woman who had seen the real Ryan Roth and ultimately rejected him. One can only speculate. Regardless, it was a pretty f***ed up thing to do. Kabu & Co. was billed in much the same way as Malala Coffee. Roth promised to connect impoverished farmers to large-scale distributors in the West. You could also purchase Kabu agricultural produce as an individual through a subscription and delivery service. Roth claimed that by connecting international distributors to small-scale farmers, the distributors would somehow reduce their overhead costs by 30 to 50%. Meanwhile, impoverished farmers would get better pay for their work and could buy new equipment and increase their output. Bizarrely, Roth claimed that the poverty of the world's small-scale farmers was the #1 cause of climate change. This isn't strictly true, but it sure made an investor feel good when they handed Roth their money. You weren't just making a savvy business decision, you were saving the planet. Kabu & Co. didn't just sell coffee beans. Roth's company supposedly comprised a network of impoverished farmers across the world who grew literally anything: wheat, rice, corn, olives, fruit, cotton, whatever. Roth boasted that Kabu & Co. had managed to recruit over 1.3 million small-scale farmers internationally, an absurdly large number, but somehow the charming Ryan Roth managed to make it sound convincing that his small company had somehow managed to do all of that legwork. Roth said that Kabu was, quote, a solution to global poverty for farmers. When you solve poverty in the #1 occupation in the world, and you bring them into the financial world, as they are currently unbanked, you can solve the #1 cause of most global problems, including climate change, poaching, deforestation, illiteracy, and much, much more. Clearly, Kabu & Co. was the answer to all the world's problems. And Ryan Roth, that eternal genius, had thought of it all by himself. In order to keep Thailand off his scent, Roth took a couple of precautions when he launched Kabu. First, he registered the company in Singapore, and online claimed that is where the company had its HQ, not Bali. Indeed, Roth had a history of visiting Singapore over the past few years, and it was known that he had a few bank accounts there, where he stashed his stolen money. Indeed, after Roth's Kabu money had been laundered in Hong Kong, Singapore was one of its likely destinations, along with possibly France and the UK. Second, Roth did not grandstand as much with Kabu & Co. and push himself to the forefront as the star of his little show. With Malala, he'd constantly posed as the boy genius, flooding the internet with his pictures and mocking up fake features of himself in magazines. With Kabu, Roth just identified himself as its CEO, and once in a blue moon was pictured on the company's social media. The rest of the photos on Kabu's website, Facebook, and Instagram were composed of stock photos of farmers and crops. What was noticeably lacking were photographs that implied Kabu & Co. was in any way a large, legitimate company producing things of its own. Roth banked on his track record as an expert on the conference circuit to convince people that he was a prominent businessman with many successful ventures behind him. But Malala Coffee was conspicuously absent from Roth's CV. Meanwhile, Roth claimed that Kabu's board of advisors included experts from agritech, fintech, and international trade law. He boasted, quote, "We've all discovered a new market, and I think it's a very big market." Roth also claimed that the two chief operating officers of Kabu were Michael Todd and Maximilian Glazer, two corporate types from the UK that Roth had schmoozed with in Bali. Michael Todd openly refutes the claim that he ever worked with Roth. He states that Roth convinced him to invest £10,000 in the company, but then Todd backed out. Meanwhile, Glazer did not respond to my inquiries about whether he had anything to do with Roth, but his CV indicates he did not. I should perhaps warn everybody not to try to go to Kabu's website, since it has been shut down and the link now takes you to a Trojan page which will try to give you a virus. It's somehow fitting, in a way. At the end of 2017, Roth founded TEDx Kangoo, alongside a yoga teacher/spiritual guru. Founding a TEDx may sound more impressive than it really is. Differing from official TED conferences, pretty much anyone can set up a TEDx, and Kangoo is a small village in Bali populated by 30 to 40,000 people, so there wasn't a lot of competition for that location. By filling out an online application and meeting some broad criteria, a nameless schlub could put on TEDx Timbuktu. According to a volunteer who goes by the pseudonym Pippa, Roth assembled a team for the conference and then simply sat back and let them do all the work. Roth's TEDx was held in October 2018, with corporate sponsorship. It had half a dozen speakers of no particular renown, some of them hawking pseudoscientific New Age bullshit in violation of TEDx's rules. When the time came to claim credit, Roth swooped in and gave the keynote address. All this was designed to impress upon potential investors in Bali that Roth was a mover and a shaker. In 2018, Roth got romantically involved with a woman named Alice Yu, whom he selected to be a replacement for Yuki Matsumura, his next submissive East Asian girlfriend, whom he could boss around and manipulate. As such, he may have been in for a shock. Alice was definitely not a submissive, quite the contrary. She was known by some people in Bali for being fairly aggressive and foul-mouthed. Her life was devoted to business and the hustle. A glance at her social media shows a lot of self-promotion and perhaps a tendency toward over-exaggeration. Roughly a decade younger than Roth, she worked as a marketing manager for a hospitality group that ran some nightclubs in Bali. Born into a fairly well-off family in Hong Kong and educated in Jakarta, Alice Yu went to an art college in Georgia in the United States, where she refined and molded her image. Although short, extremely thin, and with a mousy, high-pitched voice, Alice was definitely not the submissive Asian stereotype that Roth might have been looking for. In terms of personality, she was a heavily Americanized artsy side girl and barfly, with a penchant for using African-American slang and an apparent quote-unquote black scent. Despite not being his usual target, it's possible that Ryan Roth found a lot in common with Alice Yu's tendency to self-promote, pursue business ventures, and, shall we say, dream big. Sometime in December 2018, Alice Yu quit her marketing job and started working at Kabu & Co. full-time. While I have not drawn any hard conclusions, some of the investors who fell victim to Roth's Kabu swindle have strongly and emphatically alleged that Alice Yu acted as Roth's accomplice and profited from the scam. Allegedly. Underlined and italicized. But indeed, from an outsider's perspective, it is difficult to see how she could have worked for the company for nearly 2 years and not realized that the network of 1.3 million farmers did not exist, and the whole thing was a giant scam. Then again, Roth was very skilled at pulling the wool over the eyes of his girlfriends. Decide amongst yourselves. Over the course of 2018 and 2019, Roth continued to publicize Kabu and seek investors for the company. Mostly, he focused on rich people he met in Bali. While some of his victims were Bali locals, the island is a prime holiday location for the world's upper middle class and also upper class elite, so most of Roth's victims were visitors from abroad. There is also indication that Roth took investment money from criminal elements in Bali, motorcycle gangs, the politically connected Balinese Hindu mob, and Arab, Iranian, Russian, and Chinese drug traffickers. It is possible that Roth pitched the company to them as a sort of money laundering scheme. Roth also took in a smattering of investments from average people of, give or take, $10,000 from those who hoped to garnish their life savings. But he was also taking in numerous investments from corporate types of $50, $100, even $200,000 at a single bound. As before, Roth oversold shares in the company and concealed the total number of investors. All told, between late 2017 and early 2020, Roth cleared a little over $6 million from the Cabu scam, or $7.5 million in modern money. As a small point of interest, the daughter of my former PhD supervisor met Roth at a conference in Bali in 2019 while he was chatting up people for Cabu. Small world. I only found out about this when I was looking at Roth's Facebook and saw she was a mutual friend. Her impression of him was basically the same as mine. Douche chills. She did not invest any money in him. Predictably, by mid-2019, Roth's investors were starting to get angry. They were seeing no returns, no progress with the company, no signs of agricultural products being shipped anywhere to anyone. And the contracts Roth had made them sign seemed to have far too many loopholes for their comfort. Some investors noticed that Roth hadn't even registered his company with the Indonesian government, despite the fact he was obviously operating out of Bali and raising most of his money there. They also accused Roth of evading his taxes, both in Indonesia and Singapore. When some of Roth's investors started demanding their money back, Roth made excuses that he did not have the liquid capital to return their money immediately. I've actually seen some of the emails between Roth and his angry investors. Hilariously and perversely, Roth's email signature includes a quote which stated, "Ryan will lift 1 million people out of poverty in his first year." What a f***ing hero. Roth started ducking meetings, phone calls, and ignoring emails. When investors got a hold of him and finally got him to agree to return their money, he would start talking about paying it back in installments. One investor gave him $50,000 before demanding their money back, and Roth suggested a payment plan where he would pay $2,500 a month over the next year and a half. If Roth had also taken money from criminal elements in Bali, that might have put him in extreme peril. As Mark Baker, a Bali resident and former acquaintance of Roth, said, "Make no mistake about Bali. Underneath the surface, there are many layers. Some of them are very sinister. Things are dealt with here in a brutal way. Bali has a way of dealing with people who disrupt the harmony of this island." Meanwhile, Roth was playing for time, trying to return as little as possible to his investors while he worked on the next leg of his plan. And boy howdy, it was a doozy. Here lies Ryan Roth. On January 20th, 2020, just as the world was on the verge of going to hell in a handbasket, Roth staged his own suicide at a cliff edge near Selonding Temple in Pakatu village. It is a rather remote location, and Roth rode up there on his motorbike, which he abandoned at the scene. Roth carefully arranged, at the cliffside, a towel, a bottle of booze, his helmet, his passport, driver's license, and a suicide note addressed to Alice Yu. The note reads, "I'm sorry, Alice. I'm the man you fell in love with. But past things I never did made you feel I was a stranger. I'll always love you. None of this is your fault. Your old man, XX." Roth then wrote down Alice's email and phone number at the bottom of the note, so the police could contact her. Mercifully, at least this time, Roth's note did not come with a sperm sample. The impression all this was meant to give was that Roth had come up to the cliff in distress, sat and drank, wrote the note, and leapt to his death. But Roth did a pretty piss-poor job of staging the scene. When Balinese police arrived, they immediately smelled a rat. For a start, Roth had chosen a dumb place to fake his death. If you jumped off the cliff next to Selonding Temple, you'd hit a mass of trees and land on a bunch of rocks, not land in the ocean. There was no body found at the base of the cliff, and the dense forest and vegetation was not disturbed. The Bali police officially ruled that there was no sign of an actual suicide or indications of a fall of any kind whatsoever. The police immediately classified Ryan Roth as a disappeared person, not a probable suicide. No question. Most intriguingly, airline records show that Roth had booked a flight from Bali to Singapore, which left at 9:30 p.m. that night. And it turns out that Roth had recently applied at the UK consulate for another passport, claiming his original one was lost. This makes it likely that Roth had 2 passports, and he was able to leave one at the scene. And while the Bali police did not, at the time, think to check whether Roth was on a flight out of Bali in time to catch him, the flight manifest shows that he was indeed on the plane. He went to Singapore, and from there, nobody knows. Ryan Roth's Instagram account, which was conveniently switched to private around the time of his suicide, showed that he was following 2,784 people at the time of his supposed death. Months later, the number of accounts Roth was following increased by 3. Similarly, on July 12, 2021, Conrad McKee, formerly of the Canvas Printing Company in the UK, contacted Roth's Facebook account asking if Roth was available to chat. The message was marked as seen by whomever had access to Roth's account a year and a half after his would-be suicide. And again, in 2022, Sean Flynn, Ryan's uncle, wrote the Facebook account of Roth Management the following message. Coming soon to YouTube, the Ryan Roth story, detailing all his fake companies, charities, scams, and how he conned his grandmother. I hope you enjoy it, you worthless piece of shit. The message was marked as seen 43 minutes later. Because of the remoteness of Salonding Temple, and the fact that Roth abandoned his motorcycle at the scene, it is believed he had alternate transportation waiting for him. Some people, but not me, have alleged that this indicates Roth was assisted in faking his death. Many people, but not me, have alleged that accomplice was Alice Yu. Allegedly. Bold, underlined, italicized, and scribbled in the margins of the Magna Carta. A month after Roth's disappearance, in February 2020, his story hit multiple newspapers internationally, including the Daily Mail in the UK. However, in March 2020, the pandemic quickly overwhelmed the story, and media interest has not since been revived in the case. Additionally, while authorities firmly believe Roth is still out there, his first year of hiding was aided by the beginning of lockdowns 2 months after he disappeared. Authorities had other concerns at the time, beyond looking for one limey shithead. To this day, there is no Interpol listing currently active for Ryan Roth. But Roth is a person of interest to the Bali police, to the LAPD, to the Australian Federal Police, and to the Serious Fraud Office in the UK, and also to one angry hotel magnate in Thailand, and a shit ton of investors. 11 days after Roth's disappearance, the website for Cabu & Co. posted the following message, quote, "We regret to inform you that Cabu & Co. will cease operations as of today, January 31st, 2020. In line with regulations, we have deleted all user data from all marketplaces of Cabu & Co. This effectively made it impossible for investors to rake over the coals and look too closely at where their money had gone. It is also dubious that a company like Cabu, which claimed to have a large staff far beyond Ryan Roth and Alice Yu, liaising with 1.3 million farmers, would be incapable of surviving more than 11 days after the CEO's supposed suicide or disappearance. As for where Roth could have headed and where he is hiding today, there are a number of theories. Everyone agrees that Roth is now moving under a fake ID. That goes without saying. Some people in the Ryan Roth fan club think he's gone to Singapore, since Roth had both his money and some business contacts there. Others think Roth is being sheltered in the UK by certain members of the Flynn family, who have admittedly been non-communicative since Roth's disappearance. A Ryan Roth hate website, set up in 2020, alleges that a lot of hits on the site are coming from Hedge End in the UK, not far from where Roth grew up. Still others think Roth is lurking in holiday spots somewhere in Asia, somewhere with a lot of expats to blend in with, where tourist and immigration laws aren't too stringent or immune to bribery. After all, Roth did walk away with millions of dollars. Or perhaps Roth has struck out for new frontiers and has tried to enter Eastern Europe or South America. The final possibility is that criminal elements in Bali caught up with him, wherever he was, and that Ryan Roth is now dead. As for Alice Yu, she may be innocent of any wrongdoing and may have had no idea that Cabu & Co. was a scam. After Roth's disappearance, Alice posted a statement on her Instagram. Quote, Everything is out on the global news anyway, so here's what I have to say. I'm grateful to be alive and couldn't be more blessed with what the universe has put me through. The worst things in life happen because that's how life be. I always believe that everything happens for a reason. Every day you live to fight another day. Life's not a sprint, it's a marathon. For those who really know me, y'all know the last thing I need is a savior. So who am I? My name is Alice Yu, aka the Yu-Tang with a solid motherfucking clan. That ain't nothing to fuck with. My love for you is real, homies. You best know who you be. Meanwhile, on the surface, Roth's side note, left at the cliffside, implies that Alice had no knowledge of his crimes until recently. The note refers to things in the past he did not do, implying Alice found out that he was a con man, that Roth denied this, and became so upset that he himself. According to the Daily Mail, Alice Yu allegedly told Bali police at the time of Roth's supposed death that she had not noticed anything wrong with him in the week leading up to his pseudo-side. The implications of the note and this alleged statement do not add up. There is another version of events from Yuki Matsumura, who says she corresponded with Alice Yu after January 2020, and also from online posts made by an anonymous person who will not respond to email inquiries. It goes rather differently, but it also exonerates Alice Yu. Allegedly, in the weeks leading up to his fake death, Alice noticed strange changes in Roth's behavior. This alleged version of events says that Alice noticed he was hiding cash reserves in safes, so she decided to break up with him. According to the same account, Alice spent a week researching Roth's past and found out he was a con man. According to this version, she confronted Roth together with another business partner about his crimes, and that, allegedly, is when Roth decided to make a run for it. What we do know for certain is, in the weeks following Roth's disappearance, Alice set up a WhatsApp group for some of the cheated investors from Kabu & Co. According to Anki Cheng, one of the investors I spoke to, Alice told the WhatsApp group, and also said in individual telephone calls and emails, that Roth was a criminal and that he was always 10 steps ahead of everybody else. Alice Yu pledged to the investors that she was going to deal with the situation, and she would not rest until she had gotten people's money back. Then, according to Kabu investor Anki Cheng, Alice Yu allegedly did not do anything but delay, not answer questions, ignore emails, and not show up to face-to-face meetings that she had arranged. Then she stopped returning communications at all. According to Anki, allegedly, a few weeks later, Alice moved into a new apartment in a posh part of town and started driving a fancy new car. Allegedly. But perhaps her post-Kabu career was going really well. When I emailed Alice Yu with a request for her side of the story, using almost the exact same phrasing that I used to approach Yuki Matsumura and 24 other people, she did not respond. And while I did not message her anything on Instagram, she did take the time to find me amongst her followers and block me. This may be an entirely understandable response, given the flood of media attention she got in January 2020. On the other hand, if we were to ever track down Ryan Roth and bring him to justice, it is distinctly possible that Alice Yu might have vital information. A call to arms. Ryan Roth has enjoyed a criminal career lasting more than 2 decades, targeting hundreds of people, from the wealthy and powerful to society's most vulnerable. Over the course of those 2 decades, Ryan Roth stole approximately $13 million in modern money, and it is impossible to know if we've uncovered the full extent of his crimes. There may be considerably more victims that we are not aware of. Since nobody at all seems to believe Roth killed himself in January 2020, that means he was either murdered by criminals he cheated or is still out there in hiding today. And given that Roth appears to be a psychopath, compulsively driven to lie, cheat, and steal, and ultimately hurt people, it is likely he will not stop committing crimes until he's arrested and brought to justice. These kinds of people do not stop until they are stopped. For now, Roth may have enjoyed half a decade spending his millions of stolen dollars in Kabu money. So far, he's gotten away with pretty much everything. But I do believe in the power of the internet and its enormous capacity for sleuthing. If enough people became aware of him, I'm absolutely certain that this man can be found. Sean Flynn, Ryan's uncle, and I will be coordinating with the Serious Fraud Office UK, the Australian Federal Police, the Los Angeles Police Department, and the Bali Police Force. Please email the tip line, catchryan@hotmail.com, if you have any information. You may also contact me via the links on my YouTube channel. If you don't know anything about Roth's whereabouts, pass on the video until it reaches someone who does. Good luck, everyone, and happy hunting. Oh, and consider picking up one of my books, The Shortest History of the World. In America, it's called The Shortest History of the Universe, or The Shortest History of Sex.